Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we made it. It's Friday. We're here. Got a great show for you today. I hope the sun is shining, the birds are singing, the wind is at your back. I got the one and only Randall Healingseed.world Hansen, PhD, on the show today. Going to get into some interesting topics that I think everybody will enjoy. You may have seen Randall. If you're in the LinkedIn community, I know you're probably a friend of his. You probably had some long, in-depth conversations with him. But for those who may not know, he's a healing advocate and educator, a thought leader with a goal to help the world heal. Author of the tremendous new book, Triumph Over Trauma, which I highly suggest everybody take a look at. And one of the many things I really love about Randall is that you can often find him helping others find their healing modalities, whether it's in nature, somatics, psychedelics, spirituality, nutrition, and breath work. I'm so excited you're here today, my friend, and I can't wait to get into it today. What's up, Jeff? I see you over there, my friend. Thanks for hanging out. How's it going, Randall?
Yay! Man, Jeff, you're doing double duty today.
Yeah, great show.
I'm loving it. George, so great to be here again. I'm out in my outdoor studio because my wife is having an all-day Zoom meeting, so thank God I'm not involved in that one. But when we're in the same office, can't be in the same place. So I'm enjoying nature, and hopefully the viewers can virtually enjoy a little of the background as well.
Yeah, I think it sets a beautiful ambiance, and what a great office you have there, my friend. You got the. We were just talking about nature and therapy. It seems like you're surrounded by it.
Yeah. Every day gratitude for that, because it is. I mean, you take a break from writing or podcasting or whatever, and you look out and you just see something different every day, whether it's the clouds. Last night I was here just having my last meditation during golden hour, and I hear this kind of scratching. It kind of breaks my attention. I know, bad meditator. But I love animals, so I peeked over the edge, and there were two bunnies chasing each other down there. So yeah, healing comes in many ways, and for me, nature has always been probably the primary healing tool for me.
Yeah, it's for me, I have to agree. I think that on some level, when you find yourself in nature, whether you're just taking a walk or maybe you're sitting out on your patio, it's so healing because you get the idea that, you're part of nature, and it really helps solve the problems, or at least give you a different aspect of how to solve your problems in your life. If you're just watching the bunnies run and you're like, oh man, this kind of reminds me of this problem that's been chasing me, and you start thinking about things like that. But just to be surrounded by nature is a great way to get out of your own head.
Yeah. I found I started walking many years ago as part of my wellness routine, and I found I had to take my phone with me to start recording ideas, because when you're walking, you're not, you're blocking out all the stress of whatever day to day, and the thoughts just start flowing. And I find walking, and it was in nature too, but I just find that is just a great combo for relaxing, for new ideas, for creativity, for peace.
Yeah. Well, I think it's incredibly relevant because, when you're on a walk or when you're outside, you're surrounded by the language of nature. Unlike the language we see today that's wrapped around our entire communities, our institutions, and our own reality. Like we weave our web of reality with the language we use. And I heard you talking a little bit about the language of psychedelics. Maybe you can unpack that a little bit.
Well, I been thinking about it for a while, and then you had Dr. Rick Barnett on. He was talking about the ineffability of being able to talk about the psychedelic experience, and then that just got me thinking about. And then even I think Tom mentioned in his podcast with Jeff something about language. I can't remember what that context was, but it just hit me like, yeah, we're all. And it's kind of funny, we're talking about these things,
Right.
and sort of talking around them, because we don't have a good language to really discuss the psychedelic experience. So that's definitely something, and I know, George, you with your crazy brain have some ideas on that as well. So I'm looking forward to that, and maybe picking up on a few other things too as we go along. Sure.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. You know, I wrote down a quote that was something along the lines of language can be both a prison and a key to unlock new worlds as it constructs the boundaries of our understanding, opens doors to new possibilities. And when I started thinking about that, and when I was talking yesterday to Ben, the producer of Psych
Yeah.
2023,
Yep.
you know, we got a little bit into what we're talking about today, and that's this idea that, you know, maybe the world of that's kind of constraining psychedelics, this constraining, limiting use of language that sees it only as fragility, or that sees it maybe on the aspect of you know, it's fun, it's cool, and it's a magic pill. Like, I think that in some way this echoes the world of the world we live in, you know, and it might not be a bug, it might be a feature. Like, it might be a way to keep psychedelics in its own little cage until you can figure out how to centralize it, how you can create supply chains, and you can keep it pinned away. Maybe that's what's going on. What's your take on that?
You know, I look at the world of psychedelics, and I think it's definitely a challenge we have in separating this industry from, say, the pharmaceutical industry, where, again, if you saw my post a couple of days ago, I'm kind of on this kick again, where uh, I'm a cheap person, so, or a frugal person, as Bill Baker likes to say. So I'm a frugal person, so I buy the streaming service with ads because I don't want to pay the full price. And half the ads are pharmaceutical ads, at least half are pharmaceutical ads. And I swear they all must have the same writer director, because it's always the same thing. It's always you know, here's the amazing things I can do in my life. I have a happy family. I can play volleyball. I've never shot an archery, but I just got a perfect, you know, in the target, and all these great things, and I'm singing and I'm dancing and I'm biking. And then the second half of the commercial is, you know, beware of stroke, cancer, death, blah, 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 you know, and all these side effects.
Right.
But the gist you walk away with, magic pill. And the problem we have, and I think someone mentioned this in the this first half of the doubleheader today. Someone mentioned, you know, psychedelics aren't a magic pill, but that, again, that's that language issue, because psychedelics can be amazing. They can be an amazing healing tool. We both know that, and many others do. But it's work, and I think we have to develop another not a different language, but a different way of thinking, philosophy, something that still touts these benefits without making it like these pharmaceutical commercials that say, oh, it's all going to be happy days after you take your first psychedelic experience, because, as we know, it's not always happy days, and it sometimes takes multiple healing journeys to get to a point of healing. And it always takes the work. You have to do the integration work. It's not just a pill and I'm done and life is beautiful again. So yeah, I don't know how we get. I don't know if that's language, or if that's philosophy, or if that's framing or something. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, it's great, and I love the direction. So I think that the language that we're using, it's like fractal of society. It's like, think about legacy code. Okay, I'm gonna jump it. I'll take it back to psychedelics, but think about the way a programmer has to deal with legacy code. A programmer today goes back in and like, I don't even know what happened. I don't speak Ruby on the Rails, or I don't speak, you know, this old Java. Like, I don't even know what that means. So they're constantly putting a patch with this new code on top of this old code. But you fast forward like 40 or 30 or 20 years, no one even knows what the heck happened. And they don't even know why the person did that, because they don't understand that language.
Yep.
I think that there's a lot of that happens in the world of medicine, the world of law, in our society. If you look at the way we pass bills, it's like bills built on bills, built on bills, and it's framework built on framework, built on framework. But you can't undo this framework up here, because there's a guy way down here who has a patent that won't allow you to do it. So that's why you have to build this patch. And I think that the entire medical system, whether the clinical trials, all of that's built on this faulty infrastructure. And so that's why there's the language around it. That's why when you watch a medical commercial or a pharmaceutical commercial, they just go strictly either for fear or love, or they go straight for an emotional trigger. It's because they're not really trying to sell you a medicine's going to heal you. They're trying to sell you something that's going to make you feel good. And in that language, that's what it actually does, because they don't need, it seems to me that the science in clinical trials, and this takes us back to psychedelics, is in the medical model today, they don't really need to prove a whole lot. They just need to prove that it seems like it has a good effect. It just needs to seem like that. They're not measuring everything. And we see that in clinical trials with psychedelics. What they don't measure what they don't measure the subjective. They want to put all that to the side. And let me give people an example of what's subjective. If you have PTSD and you take psychedelics, and a month later your family is crying tears of joy because they know you're better, they don't measure that in clinical trials. That's not in there. If the tears of your mother crying because her son has came back to life is not a fair and attributable thing to being healthy, I don't know what is. But science is like, we're not going to measure that. Why not? Why don't you measure that? We don't have the tools. It's like in science and math, we don't have the tools to measure non-Euclidean space, so we just pretend it's not a thing. And it's the same thing in clinical trials. Medicine refuses to measure that which they can't understand. And I think that the psychedelics bring spirituality back in there. And spirituality is a component we should measure. I know it's kind of a long-winded way of saying that, but it's all about language, right?
Yeah, I love it. I want to come back to that last statement you made. But first, I want to come back because I love what you said, because this is something I wish everyone could hear. So let's put George Monty on the mountain and have him every one of these prescription ads we see, it's not about healing, it's about symptom management. And yes, that's a good thing. I mean, if you have migraines, heck yes, I want you to have symptom management so you don't have to be in a dark room for 3 days or something like that. But for depression or PTS or anxiety or OCD, who wants to live a life where I'm simply managing the symptoms?
Right.
I want to heal. I want to have a life like you talked about. I want to be that veteran that, the family says, "Oh my God, he's back or she's back," and so I think we have to somehow break both that ingrained sense. I also saw a reaction to what my post about that, where this woman said, "Oh yeah, I hate all those ads and I would never do any of those." She said, "Unless my doctor told me to take one." And I was like, no, you're missing the point. Yes, that's good. But that brings in the other half of the equation, which is, many of our Western doctors are just symptom managers. They're not the true healers. And that, again, that's what most of these prescription drugs are symptom management, not healing. And so, but psychedelics are healing if you do, or back that up. Psychedelics help you heal if you do the work involved with it, because it's involved in really doing that inner work that I think that was the last part you were talking about. So it allows you to do inside yourself, and actually, there's a line we all talk about, we are all our own healers. We have the healing within us. And that's true, we do. But if we have trauma, and especially childhood trauma, we spend all our life blocking it, not looking within. We talk about that, we fracture ourselves. And so that's another piece of that language. How do we convey that trauma fractures us? And as much as we might try to pretend to be whole and healthy, we're not, because we are wearing masks or we're pushing stuff down. And so psychedelics, but also meditation, breath work, allows us to do that inner work in a safe environment, rather than that scared child or that scared adult that had that trauma.
Yeah, I see a pattern here, and You know, when you talk about us being fragmented or broken down, on some level, I almost think that that's what culture in our society does, and that's how it works. It seems to me, and this, forgive me if this sounds a little bit too woo-woo, but we live in somewhat of an authoritarian system, and we always have,
Yep.
whether it was the monarchy back in the day,
Yep.
and the best way to control people is to keep them in fear.
Yep.
And maybe we should get into this idea of fear in language, but let me just stay on this
Yeah.
premise of where we're at. What if it's not a bug? What if it's a feature? Like, think about the media that comes out. It's like, you're going to go to war. You're all going to die. No one's going to work. You guys all suck. Black people hate white people. Be afraid of gay people. Like, just constant bombardment of fear that is out there to scare you. It's there to fragment you. It's there to make sure that when you go to work, you don't ask for more money. It's there when you get up and you wake up and you're like, oh man, I got to leave my family for 14 hours because I got to put food on the table. Oh, I shouldn't say what's on my mind because I don't want to get in trouble.
Yep.
Think about the way we go to school. Kids go to school and they sit in front of a classroom where they have an authoritarian figure, and it's based on Pavlovian whistles and bells. And we're taught at a young age to be fearful. And so much of the people coming into psychedelics that are breaking through PTSD, that have generational trauma, are confronting that fear. Yeah. And I think that's something that's happening with our language. Like, we're beginning to change our language from retreats to confrontation. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think it speaks volumes of where we are in our life with substances. And maybe we can move into this idea of, we are changing from marijuana to medical cannabis. Yeah. We are changing from, hey, instead of this weed being called white widow weed, now I'm going to turn the label and I'm going to see the terps on there. I'm going to see the THC content on there. We are growing as people, and it's being reflected in our language. I think that's a very positive thing that's moving forward. What's your take on that whole aspect?
I agree. I mean, I as an educator, advocate, I believe in many of the things you say. I want to just go back for 1 second, because I love your comment about fear-based, and so much of it is. And we also, for lack of a better word, I would say oftentimes I feel like our government is paternalistic.
Sure.
I don't need another dad telling me what to do, but that's what it is. I mean, you can only do this, you can do that, you can do that. And I think that's what scared the government in the late 60s and 70s, early 70s, is like, whoa, we're losing control. We better rein in these great medicines, because people are all of a sudden realizing, hey, there's a greater life out here that's not involved with going to war or the government or any of that. And I think that maybe that should be part of the message, George, because I've been working on healing. I've talked about triumph over trauma, and I think maybe some of those words, trauma, even healing, which I think is a positive word, I think maybe that scares people because of that, because of this culture of fear. So maybe we need to say something like, not lose all your fear, but I mean, it has to be something like that. We need to find a linchpin that people understand in this cultural setting, as you're talking about, in this language that we have, because healing, they still think go to the doctor. And trauma is something we don't talk about, or something that didn't happen to me because, I've lived this great life. And I believe with Dr. Peter Levine and Dr. Gabor Mate that we all have experienced trauma, whether we know it or not. A lot of it's childhood trauma, some of it's intergenerational, some of it's as adults, and it affects us. And that trauma actually helps fuel the fear within us. That those work in tandem, because if we're traumatized, we already are fearful of it, something happening like that again. Add to that the fear of our culture, and you really, wow. We need to figure out a way to change that language for sure, George.
Well, I think your book your book is awesome, and I think the people who haven't read Triumph Over Trauma should definitely check it out. But as I was thinking about it today, in the conversation we're having now, one of the side effects of overcoming trauma is wanting to understand why it happened.
Yeah.
And people who face their traumas begin to have the confrontation with fear. And so, on some level, the side effect of trauma is standing up to the people or situations that caused it. And this gets us right back to what you said about what happened, in the last round of this sort of psychedelic waves that are happening. And you know what? If we're being honest with ourselves, in some ways, maybe what we just saw with psychedelic 2023, maybe we're like in the late 50s, and all of a sudden, like just you and I having this conversation about, wait a minute,
Yeah.
what are we doing out here? We should be moving back out to the fields, man. We should be finding ways to live our best life.
Yes.
Maybe what we're seeing right now is a slow creep into the 60s right here, where just our language alone, talking about facing fears, could be something that begins to scare the people in the positions of authority. That, and if you look at the facts, hey, workplace participation rate is at its lowest. At some point in time, the people that run that are going to be like, how do we get these people back to work? Why are they not working? Why are they not working for the amount of money that we give them? Like, what's the problem here? And pretty soon it's going to be these dirty hippies or these dirty psychedelic people, in some ways, if you just squint your eyes a little bit, you can begin to see that whole little rotation going again. I don't know, man. Is that too crazy?
It's cool. I mean, I hope so, because I love live your best life. And if that wasn't used by like 10 pharmaceuticals, I would love to steal that. But see, that's the problem with our vocabulary again.
Right.
I mean, this is what psychedelics do. Almost every person that I've talked to that is healed, not just through psychedelics, but even healing in other ways, have almost all changed their career path, their job, looked at their career and job in a totally different perspective. Because now that job that I was working 10 hours and a 2-hour commute each way, and I was paying for the bills and all that. All of a sudden I realize now, man, that's a shit job. Why am I working it? And I want to help people. I mean, that's the other cool thing I love about the psychedelics is that, or healing, I should say, but psychedelics is one of the main ways, is that when we heal, we then turn around and say, how can I help others?
Yeah.
And I again, not to give you a big pat in the back or make you embarrassed, but again, I just love with you you're an example of this. You had a fine job and all that, but typical of all of us, probably not the great bosses that we would love to have. But then as you heal, and as you also expand with this podcast, you say, well, that job's not serving me anymore.
Yeah.
And how can I get my voice and the voice of this beautiful spectrum of guests that you have? How can I get that out to the world and help other people, feel that love, feel that healing? And so I think that's fantastic. Back to language just for a second, because I also want to pick your brain, and maybe even whoever's still on their brains, about skeptics, because back to language. So I have a brother-in-law, and we talk about having these awkward conversations about psychedelics with your family and friends. So I was visiting him last year, and he didn't want to talk about psychedelics at all. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll break it more gently by talking about cannabis, because cannabis is also certainly a master plant and has many healing benefits. Sure. And throughout the whole conversation, we actually did have a somewhat conversation about this, but it was all about marijuana. The marijuana. And I'd say, oh, you mean the cannabis. And he'd say, marijuana. And I'm like, well, if you're trying to meet me halfway here, marijuana, some say it's a racist term. Even if it's not a racist term, it is certainly part of the war on drugs. That was, the evil marijuana.
Yeah.
So again, that's just so that's again changing the language a little bit. Cannabis is actually the name of the plant, so why don't we just call it by the? He's this big, science thinker type person. So I'm like, well, this is the scientific name, so you should, especially you, should be calling it that.
Yeah.
So I think language does play a role in how we do this. And I know medical marijuana sounds nice and all that, but medical cannabis, as you said, is just rolls off the tongue just as well. I also love that one of my cannabis people posted a meme that said, all cannabis use is medicinal. And I'm sure some of the, maybe recreational users love that meme, but it's true in the sense that just like psychedelics, yes, I am a strong proponent of the intentional use for healing, but so many people I've talked to, did psychedelics recreationally as a kid or not, as a teenager or young adult, or maybe still doing it today, and they're still getting the benefits. That's the cool thing about these plants. That, again, I'm not saying everyone should be doing recreational psychedelics or cannabis, but these plants are so healing that they'll work even if you're not setting an intention to do that work. They're not going to maybe do the healing part, but they'll do some of the other cool stuff in your brain. And for me, cannabis is a pain reliever.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm taking it recreationally one day, all of a sudden, oh yeah, there's my knee feels great now. Now I can go an extra 5 miles on this hike. So, I think that's part of the language too, because, for so long these have been called drugs, and yes, they are drugs, but that's why, we're trying to use medicines, again, language, but
Yeah.
medicines maybe aren't the right word, because now then it starts getting into the pharmaceuticals and we just talked about how we hate all those ads. So, and some people call them substances, but there's another word. What could we call them that fits what we feel they are? Because in my mind, they are medicine, but then medicine has kind of a mixed bag of connotations. So what do you think?
I think we could go with like exogenous neurotransmitters.
Yes, that rolls off the tongue quite well.
Why not? Like if you look at the way they interact inside the brain, they're doing the same thing a neurotransmitter does.
Yeah.
And if people would permit me this little, a lot of people believe in the Big Bang, but why not? If we're going to believe in some sort of creation myth, why don't we believe that maybe we don't come into this world, maybe we come out of it? And if we're part of this planet, why wouldn't we have exogenous neurotransmitters that help us see the world in a way that's different? Why wouldn't we have substances or medicine or plants that help us understand what nature's trying to tell us? And I think that's what's happening. Like if anybody who has used cannabis or used mushrooms thoroughly begins to feel the connection with nature, the way in which they once felt a connection to their mom in the womb, like you're connected to it. And this particular bridge is something that shows you that. It allows you to walk down this bridge and become this oneness that we often talk about, this non-duality that's there. And I think that medicine is a limiting description of psychedelics. Like it's so one-dimensional. And that takes us back to, hey, maybe it's not a bug, it's a feature. If we classify it as medicine, now all of a sudden we can use the framework of centralization. We can use the framework of supply chains. Once we put it into that box, we can limit it and market it and sell it. And that brings me to this idea of, like, why do we even need, like, I don't understand why we need to figure out what's going on in the brain with it. It works. And, if you start drilling down on some of these incredible people who have spent, and I love them all. I'm so stoked there's people out there that are doing the work to find out what happens with the 2A receptor. But what do we know? We don't know that much. After millions of dollars and after thousands of hours, we don't know that much. But we do know it works. Yeah. We know that much. So, why are we using our language and why are we using our tools to not move forward? It's like we have this awesome tool in our hand, but rather than use it, we're trying to figure out the best way it fits in our hand. Hey, let's start using the tool. Right?
That's actually very brilliant. I love that. I agree with you. The all the scientists that are doing the research on the brain, and I love that neuroplasticity part of it. But and my focus is more on the healing part. But I kind of sometimes skip over the spiritual part and the transformational part of it, because to me it's all part of the healing. You can't, in my mind, you can't have that spiritual connection to that oneness, to the divine, to the source, to whatever, and unless you are healed. But you're right, it's not. I agree with you. I'm not hung up on the how. I love seeing it. I love
Right.
seeing those brain scans. But I'm more focused on the outcome. Like, whoa, you're a different person today than you were last week, last month, because of the healing. And so, yeah, wow. But how do we? So, okay, I agree with all that, but my brain is still, how do we package that in a way that people understand, um, separate from the medical model, separate from anything else they've heard, and then also going against all the lies they've heard, for
Mm.
on the war on drugs. How how do we do that? And Dr. Matei, I was listening to a podcast. She talked about recovery. We have to recover. Everyone needs a recovery journey.
Mm.
And to me, that sounds too much like an addiction aspect. Whenever I think about recovery, I think of someone recovering from an addiction. So I don't know if that's the right word. I don't think it is, but I'd love to find it. And one more thing before I forget, George, I love what you said about the nature, because I watched this documentary and I'm looking outside of my property right now, and there are all these native weeds, as we call them today, all these native plants. I see yarrow, St. John's wort, some other ones that all have healing medicinal
Yeah.
powers that we've all lost.
Yeah.
I mean, we could heal ourselves just by walking through nature and pulling certain plants. If we know this one needs to be smoked, or this one needs to be made into a tea, or this one does whatever. And so nature does provide for us, and that's what these plants, do for us. They heal us. But how do we get that across when we're so disconnected from nature today?
Well, I think the first part is being aware. And I'm glad you said that. Well, isn't it interesting that you can look out right now to the side of your house and see all these plants that heal us? But instead of us going out there and using those plants, we try to pick those plants, put them in a lab, decipher what's in them, and then make a synthetic version of them and then test it on people to see if it's the same thing and then if they work. Like, what are we doing? Just use
I
the plant.
know.
It's right there.
I know.
So, but there's a lot of great comments in here, and we're going to get back to language, and we're definitely
Yeah.
going to get back to the idea of skepticism. But let's go through these here because I'm
Sure.
so stoked to have these people here.
Yeah, I
So we
love
got,
seeing all these.
yeah, thank you to everybody. Let's see what we got here. We got Jeff starting everything off. He started us off with a double header, him and Tom. Thank you guys, great show this morning.
Yeah, it was great.
We got the incredible Salisha Abbas, who's if you
you,
don't
Vic.
know what she's up to, Google her right now, or just go on LinkedIn and see what she's going. She's weaved this web of being an esthetician in psychedelics, which I think is another way that fits into what we're doing, Rand. I think that, beginning to see people branch out into the world of estheticians and cosmetics, and, it's a treatment that goes well with psychedelics, like so much of it. It's a pretty incredible tributary, right?
Yeah.
We got Aliana. I think I'm saying her name right here. The marketing guru right here. Yep. Incredible woman. Mm-hmm. Go back to Jeff. Here we got one from Emma Cicinero. Emma, thank you so much for an EMDR therapy.
That's
Man,
great.
What do you know about EMDR? I don't know much about it.
I know that some people use that for PTS, post-traumatic stress. It's just another way of again trying to get into that conscious state and kind of disarm the default mode network, so that you can then see again. It's similar to a psychedelic experience in the sense of you're allowed to go kind of remove all the stimuli and just get to that trauma, and it's almost like, it's not like watching a film strip, but you just see the experience and you move through it. So I think again, for those that are still afraid of psychedelics for whatever reasons, and some people will just be afraid in general, that EMDR is definitely a good method for dealing with trauma as well.
Yeah, good way to get in and get, maybe kind of get into the water a little bit and see how
Yeah,
you feel about it.
yeah.
I think so. Lori, Lori, if you could see my desk, like I have all these papers around me, and they're all little like notes. So I'll write like 4 or 5 keywords, and I try like at first I'll memorize the quote, and then I'll just put up a note, and then I'll paraphrase from that. So I probably didn't quote it exactly right, but I have found that if you read something and then just make like 4 keywords, your brain will fill in the gaps there. And sometimes it's pretty humorous, but I highly recommend it. Thank you for
Right.
commenting right there.
Two quick comments on that. First,
Yeah,
Lori,
man.
thank you. One is sometimes when I watch George on the podcast, he does this, and I
Yeah.
swear he has notes on his ceiling too. I think he really does. But
I
the
got
other interesting thing, just a geeky educational comment, there's a whole body of literature called Writing to Learn. And there's a real truth to that. If you read something and you just write a couple notes, and then you maybe write it again and maybe one more time, that's a great memory technique. Your brain does it does get stuck in your brain. So, a lot of us don't write anymore because it's all on devices, but that old fashioned way still works. Good.
Yeah,
Anyway, thanks, Lloyd.
yeah, that's awesome. The more modalities you use, like if you think it, if you write it and you say it out loud,
Yep.
or maybe you could even sing it. Like if you just did those 4 things, you'd probably remember it way better, right?
I'm just picturing myself singing some of these things. I love it.
Oh, Celicia's got a great one here. I love this conversation and sorry to have to hop off. I love your comments on language. Yes, psychedelics have a huge potential to help a lot of people, but they are not a panacea.
Yep.
And much be appreciated intentfully and carefully. Can't wait to catch up with the rest later. Thanks, George and Randall. Thank you, Celicia. It's always a pleasure to have you on and hear your thoughts. And we're stoked on what you're doing as well.
Can I just say something, George?
Anytime, please.
Yeah. So I have a friend close to me that is going through some bad stuff, and but she's playing the victim. She's not ready for that healing. So she's definitely been traumatized, especially even more recently, lost her house, lost her car, lost custody of her child. She's has alcohol use disorder, and now is moving on to some other worse drugs. And I want to help her, but I can't because she's blaming everybody else. She's blaming society. She thinks all she needs is a hand up to get back on her feet, not even mentioning all the bad stuff going on. And so I just want to mention that in terms of this also, because we talk about, yes, psychedelics, you have to be intentional.
Yeah.
But you can't get to that point until you admit your reality. That I don't like my reality anymore. And it could be something as small as I don't like my job anymore. That's a piece of that puzzle that we're, from day one, one of the first questions people ask us when we're kids is, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
And so so that's ingrained in our heads, work. And so I think that's one little piece of the healing journey that maybe you're not even on that journey yet, but all of a sudden you realize, wow, I don't like this job. It's not fulfilling me. Maybe that's part of it. Or it's a realization that, I just lost my apartment and my car, and there's something seriously wrong here. And I need to look at this. I need to figure out what's going on. So yes, every healing journey has to start with this kind of a realization of that you have a problem. But then I agree with Celicia 100% that yes, as we talked about earlier today, it's not a magic pill. It can work amazing things that we've both experienced, but you have to do it intentionally, and you have to do the work afterwards. It's not just take it and have the fun experience. So anyway, blah blah blah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I feel it. I think, look, if I'm honest with myself, I've been down that road. I found myself being angry and blaming people and afraid. And, when you do that, in some ways, I think the world takes things away from you because it wants you to understand that you have to face it, and everything you're going to lose everything. Like, fear will take everything from you until you
Yeah.
stand in front of it. But the beauty of it is, all you have to do is stand in front of fear to scare it. If you stand up to fear, fear will get smaller. If you stand
Yep.
up to fear, it'll shrink down. If you stand up to fear, you'll see your image in it. You'll see your reflection in it, and it won't be as scary. And pretty
Yeah.
soon, all those things will come back. To your friend who's lost everything, I'm so sorry. Like, I got goosebumps, and I know what it's like to be scared and fearful. But if you just take one step
Yep.
forward, I promise you,
Exactly.
all those things can come back, and they can come back in ways that you've never imagined. But
Yeah.
you have to be willing to hold the space for yourself and be like, look, what am I doing wrong? Ask that question, and like, what can I do that's
Mm.
right? And stop. Like, it's really hard because it's really easy to look at everyone else, but oh, they had help, or someone helped them, or
Yep.
why can't that happen to me? Like, it can happen to you, but you have to be willing to help yourself before anyone else will help you. But there's tons of people will rush in to help you if you begin helping other people and helping yourself.
Exactly. Yes. Love that. I was going to say, I just want to echo that. That
Yeah.
yes, what once you take that first step and say, "Hey, I need help," you'll be amazed at how many people come in, especially those of us that have found healing and want to help people. So yeah, I love that. What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
And what ideas do you have that might help me? And
Yeah.
go from there. Yeah.
That's why I think on some level, like, when people are ready for psychedelics, I think psychedelics allows you, part of the problem there, at least for me, was that it's so much that you don't want to confront it. And when you don't want to confront it, the
Yeah.
world crashes in on you. And psychedelics gives you a gentle way to begin seeing it. Like, in my opinion, psychedelics helps you understand it's not your fault. And when
Yep.
you understand that part, it gets easier to look at it like, oh, okay, this is a situation I can fix. Instead of just
Yep.
crushing myself, instead of just beating myself up until I'm a bloody pulp and hating myself, why don't I look and see if there's some little things I can do to fix it? And it just shifts your focus from blaming yourself and hating yourself so much. And so much of people that find themselves down and out are finding themselves in self-hatred and stuff like that. And
Yes.
like, there's no way out of that. Like,
Yeah.
it's a self-destructive manner. And it breaks my heart because I know what it feels like. And we've all seen people in our lives that have gone through there, but there's a way out. I
Yeah.
promise you, there's a way out of it.
Yes.
So
There's definitely a way out. And I love your thing about fear. And it made
yeah,
me all of a sudden when you said that, it made me think about bullies. And the
there you
same
go.
thing, you face that bully, and many times they back away because it's all bluff.
Yeah.
It's all they're insecure, they're afraid, and so they're putting up this big thing, and you stand up to them. Same thing with fear. Fear is doing that same thing. Oh, if you don't take, this pill, this is going to happen to you or whatever, and it's fear, fear, fear. And if you just face up to it, well, let me look at the research. Oh, no, I don't need to take that pill, or I don't need it. So yeah, so facing up, I think, is brilliant, George. If we can just
Yeah.
be brave enough, because it does
It's
take
hard.
sometimes bravery, to say,
Yeah.
especially if you're that far down, to be
Yeah.
able to say, wait a second, this is BS. I don't need this. Fear is crushing me, and it doesn't. And 9/10 of it is BS. It's not real. And so, how do I fix that? So I love that. Yes.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I think a lot of the answers to our life have been written in mythology. And when I hear people that
Mm,
have fallen far, I think of the hero's journey. And I honestly
yeah.
believe the further you fall, the bigger your hero arc, right? Because when we look at the stories, like,
Yeah.
it's this person that had stuff and then they fell to the bottom and you're like, oh, they're done. But then when they come back, like,
Mhm.
it's ingrained in every one of our souls. I think it's written on our hearts that we love a comeback.
Yep.
Everybody loves a comeback. Everybody loves to see the bad news bears.
Yep.
Everybody loves to see that person that should never be at the top get there and stay there and excel. And so, in some ways, if you can harness that, if you can just dig down deep and read the scripture on your heart, you have the instructions to do it. And I think that people that find themselves in the bottom, as hard as it is down there, maybe what's happened is you've been put in the forge and everything bad about you has been burned away so that you can rise as the phoenix and become better than you've ever been. Like maybe that's what it means. Maybe you're in a process of becoming the best human being that's ever been born. You know, you begin to look at it like that. Like, okay, I've had all the fat burned away from me. I've had all the troubles burned away from me. Now I can begin at the beginning, and now I can build the world I've always wanted for myself. And I think that's a good way to start seeing it at that bottom down there.
I love it. I as you were talking, I immediately said Phoenix Rising, and then you said it, darn it all. But yes, perfect. I think that's right. That Phoenix Rising is a beautiful imagery. You know, hard to see when you're at the bottom, but to have that, to be able to clutch on to some hope like that is awesome. And yeah, I think we all do love the underdog, and I love that idea of hope for people that, it's like that rubber band. It's stretched all the way down. You're so far, but it's going to snap higher. You know, it's going to fly you up there to a much better life.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We got our good friend Bob in here. He's let me see. Where we're gonna start. We'll start with this one. This is from the beginning of our conversation when he said, "I agree with Randall that this has to be addressed. I see a couple of things that have to be addressed. There isn't enough information about aftercare or downside." What do you think about that?
I agree. You know, I think I can't remember if I told you this, George, but when I first got into psychedelics, people were, oh yeah, you go to a retreat and you know, you have a couple integration circles and you're done. I'm like, wow, that almost sounds like a magic pill, you know?
Yeah.
And then, you know, as I got more involved in psychedelics, I was looking at it and, you know, no, the key part of this whole process is the work, is the integrate, what we call the integration. And maybe that needs a new word too. I don't know. But and I think any healing, whatever modality you use, you need to integrate. What is this, you know, what does this new insight mean? How does it fit into my new plan of life and what's going on? And so, you know, now when I talk to people about psychedelics, I said, you know, just be prepared to integrate really the rest of your life, because it's not a one and done or four and done or whatever. Because first of all, you have new experiences that are happening every day in your life, and you might have some other traumas that happen to you, small, large, whatever. And so it's not just psychedelics and done. And then the aftercare also is, you know, if you have a challenging experience, you know, that needs a lot more integration, because there's that fear again. You know, oh, I thought I was avoiding fear. Now I'm having this crazy, challenging experience. And, you know, George, I think just talking about our language thing now, this is just off the cuff, but I wonder how much of that fear that we store within us from this culture, from society, from media, from our parents, along with that trauma, if that doesn't also help in a negative way, a challenging experience in a psychedelic journey. Because you know, we've had discussions with people that have set their intention, you know, the setting was perfect, uh, everything was all there, they went in, and they still had, you know, images they never want to see again in their lives, or things like that that were challenging to them. My thing, of course, is sometimes they call them bad trips. I'm like, no, that's again the drug war talk. Let's call it a challenging journey. But those people need aftercare. And so again, I do, you know, as we look at the bigger picture of psychedelics and how people do psychedelics, if the psychedelic guide model still exists down the road after things get rescheduled and or decriminalized, I think one of the things that all psychedelic facilitators have to do ethically is have a package or something of many integration sessions, not just 2 after the session, or some have 3 or 4. I think you need to have that. So I agree that there is that. And again, that's moving away from this idea that it is a magic pill, because it's not. It is going to take the work. And you know, even if you do journeys 4 times a year or however many times, again, all that work, you just got to keep doing the work. You got to have to keep doing that integration.
It's well said.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I think the integration, like I love the idea that you have to keep doing the work, because the integration is an ongoing relationship with the psychedelic substances, and
Yeah.
it's not just taking it and then thinking about what happened for a while. It's
Right.
then it's like each one is a step. So you take a step up and then you pause. You take a step up and then you pause. But
Yeah.
each time you take a psychedelic substance, I think you're building on the momentum of the last one. And that's why it's
Definitely.
imperative to have a relationship. So the integration is never done.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it seems to me that the the a psychedelic retreat center is like a dip in the shallow end, and they should
Mm.
be set up as like maybe they should be like a kindergarten. A retreat center is like a kindergarten. Like, you go there to learn the ABCs of
Mm.
psychedelics, and you get a little bit there. But ultimately, I think that the people that really need help are going to need to go to something vastly superior to a retreat center. They're going to need long-term work with a health professional that thoroughly understands the problem they're going through, who has probably gone through the same problem.
Yeah.
But the retreat centers are a great place for people who are curious to begin to understand what a journey with this substance may look like. So yeah, I do. I think that and that's a process that we can look to the future to see that can help people. And I see it unfolding in ways that can be beautiful. And I'm hopeful and thankful that it can move in that direction.
Yeah, and just to tie into what you just said, reminded me, psychedelics back to the 60s,
Yeah.
LSD was being used by many thousands of
Yeah.
psychologists and psychiatrists to help with the therapy sessions. And so I see that as part of the model in the future as well.
Yeah.
Um, having someone to help give you a framework for discussing these things if you don't have that. And I would love to see that be sort of that same thing as you talked about the retreat center. The retreat center is the start of that.
Yeah.
Same thing with talk therapy, but then maybe after they get enough of that, they can then start doing that own work on their own. And I know many people, George, I know you do too, that do the psychedelic work on their own.
Yeah.
But I think it has to you have to get to a
Yeah.
point first.
Sure.
It's not safe until you learn the ropes, how to deal
Yeah.
with this, what these substances do, how long a journey is going to take, what things you want to have around you in your setting to make sure it's safe and all these things. So, but I think, yeah, then it has to be, I think on an earlier podcast, we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
So I think, I never quite grasped that self-actualization before psychedelics,
Right.
because I always thought, how do you get to that point? Because he talks about that point where you basically you've achieved this self-enlightenment and you have this sense of we are all connected, we're all one, and this wanting to be of service, to give back. And I looked at our culture, our society, and I'm looking at Maslow's hierarchy. I'm like, I get the social needs, I get the the some of the other steps in the process, but it's self-actualization. But I think with healing, with psychedelics, that's a place we can finally get to and finally understand ourselves, maybe for the first time since we were or not, maybe not infants, since we were children, that we now really understand our core selves, like we never have in 50 years, 40 years, whatever, however old you are.
Yeah, I agree. And it's sometimes I wonder, like, when we look back at the way in which there's a lot of literature that says in some indigenous cultures, only a handful of people would really take the
Yeah.
psychedelics. Like,
Yep.
there may be ceremonies where people go from adulthood to manhood, or from
Yeah.
adulthood to womanhood, where they take them once or twice. But in a lot of literature, it says that there's a handful of people that take them, and that they help the community move through. And sometimes, like, as you and I and so many people in this community, we're so locked into this. Like, we eat, breathe, and sleep it. Like, we're like, it can do this, it can do that. Look at it, look at that. Maybe it is for a handful of people. And maybe this is a handful of people, like we want everyone to experience what we're experiencing. But the truth is, when you get outside a few of the ripples, people are afraid, they're scared, they're comfortable.
Yeah.
And maybe, on some level, maybe it's not for us to decide what people should do. And I juggle with that because I'm like, I think it could help so many people. And I really think it would totally benefit all these people. But then, after I think about that, or I pull on that thread long enough, I'm like, who am I to tell those people they need that? Maybe they don't, man. Maybe it would help them, but maybe they're fine. So it's a weird sort of dichotomy we're looking at, right?
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I with this book and the new book I'm working on, it's that same struggle. Like, who am I to say you should be healing? But I think it's also it's almost like this obligation I feel.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not gonna twist someone's arm. Here, take a mushroom. But so I think, another way, maybe it's not language at all. Maybe it's something like psychedelic science, or maybe it's like this podcast, or maybe it's 1,000 podcasts where it's not the words we're saying, but how we're seeing ourselves, expressing ourselves, being seen. Because again, how do you describe healing to someone who feels like they're totally fine? You can't. So maybe so let's pull that back a little bit. Maybe they're just not ready. Not in the way my friend is, that she's ready. She's just not, I mean, she desperately needs one. She's just not ready in that sense. But then there are others that say, oh, I'm perfectly fine. Oh yeah, I was molested as a kid, but I'm over that. Maybe. And if you are, wonderful.
Awesome.
I'm not going to be amazing. I don't know. I'm a survivor, and I know many others who are survivors of that. And I can say I'm now over it. 20 years ago, I could lie and say I was over it, and I definitely was not, because I was saying to everyone around me, oh yeah, I'm over it. And then I was going out and getting drunk and doing stupid things and passing out in my truck. And so, that's clearly, I'm not healed. It was screaming to me, but I wasn't looking at it.
Yeah.
Because outwardly I'm like, oh yeah, I'm healed, I'm fine. And so that's another question. So, how do we get those people that we see them clearly fractured, clearly not healed, but they're going around saying I'm healed? I guess, again, they're none of our business, unless, they're a dear friend. If it's their acquaintance, well, we just have to let them live their lives, I guess. But yeah, I just hear so many stories of so many people telling me, these veterans saying, damn it, there'd be no more wars. And just imagine how much we could cut the defense spending that the defense bill just passed in the Senate, and the House just passed their own versions of it. I don't know how many trillions it is, but how much of that could be reinvested in building more parks, building better food centers, building regenerative agriculture, better roads, better, all this stuff that would make life better. But again, this fear, no, we need to spend trillions on defense to be the world's police and all that. And when you're healed, it's like, that stuff doesn't matter anymore. What matters is, how's my neighbor next door? How are they doing? Are they okay? What am I eating? Am I eating Krispy Kreme and a Diet Coke chaser, or I'm eating something healthy? It's like, I don't know. Now I'm sort of lost track of where we were going, but I just think it's so many people are broken. Many of us realize it, many of us don't. And for me, the biggest example I had was, like I said, I literally realized at some point I was wearing multiple masks, and it got really exhausting, because I had to remember, oh, in this group, I'm this guy, I'm happy Ran, in this group, I'm intellectual Ran, or whatever. And then in the bar, I'm fun Ran, and woo. So I realized, but then you have this little freak out. Whoa, well, who is the real?
Right.
Whoa. And if I pull them all off, do I want to see who that real one
Mm.
is? And I think, again, back to that, that's where that healing starts. So yeah, I agree. It's not our place. I love Matt Zeman, and I love what he says. I love the title of his book, Psychedelics for Everyone. But then he says, but they're not for everyone. So it's
Yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
juxtaposition,
Yeah.
And I agree. I agree, George. I think psychedelics could help every single person, especially in the Western world, because we are the most messed up. We have the most chronic illnesses. We have the most addiction,
Hmm.
all these problems. But it's not again, if we are doing that, then we're becoming that paternalistic, oh yes, you must heal.
Yeah.
No, they
Yeah.
they
Good point.
they have to decide to heal.
Yeah, that is a beautiful summation of it. As much as we want to help people, we got to be careful about becoming that paternal person who
Yep.
forces healing on people. Like the people that hear the conversations, they say that when you're ready, the teacher will show up. Maybe
Yep.
just having a podcast or maybe talking about it becomes the words of the teacher that shows up to people that need the help. And that's enough,
Well,
I think. You know what I mean?
yeah. Well, let me give you an example.
Yeah, please.
So, uh, I was during my breakdown, or whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
I was living in Florida, and I can't tell you where it came from, and certainly wasn't the psychedelic experience, but I just got the sense I needed to leave the state, and I needed to buy land, and live in the forest. I had no idea why. It wasn't. I mean, as a kid, when I was a teenager, I did love environmentalism. I did think about being a forest ranger, going to the Forest Service. So I did have that nature connection early on, but everyone I knew looked at me like I had just gone insane. Like, here you live in suburbia, a flat, hot state, and you're talking about moving to the PNW where there's snow, mountains, and you're talking about living in a forest? Are you crazy? And there were moments where I thought, maybe I am. And then it turned out nature was the greatest healer of my
Yeah.
life. But And so, just getting to your point, I was called to it without even knowing I was called to it. So again,
Yeah.
how do you express that? I think you're right. I think the healer finds you, whether it's the psychedelic. We talk about the plants all the time.
Yeah.
The fungi come to you, or ayahuasca calls to you, and I think there's a lot of truth to that, because we are part of nature. So I think there's that element that, yeah, the when we're ready, it'll show up. But I guess for me, I would say the warning sign or whatever is, it might be something totally weird, like buying land thousands of miles away from where you live.
Yeah.
But don't let that fear say, oh, that's a dumb idea. I started believing people, and I started doubting, maybe I shouldn't buy this land. And wow, thank God I did, because that led to healing. That led me to finding the most amazing partner. And she's not listening, so I can say
Yeah.
that. No, but I mean, everyone who knows Jenny in this space, in fact, they probably love her more than they love me, and that's totally fine, because she's a more beautiful person than I am. She literally, one of her psychedelic journey, without giving too much away, because it's her journey, but she holds space for so many people during the psychedelic journey. She had this amazing release that felt like 1,000 souls were leaving her body, and she had this lightness to her that she hadn't felt in years. And I think for anyone that's a true empath like that, they hold that in. And so, again, now I lost where was I going with that, George? I
You were
lost that.
talking about the incredible experience she had and how beautiful of a
Yeah,
person she was.
yeah. And so healing comes in all these different ways, and I think if you let that fear go of whatever the idea is,
Right.
whether it's a psychedelic, whether it's going to India to ashram or going to buy land in a forest or
Yeah.
going on a month-long meditation, whatever, whatever's calling to you, I think that's important to investigate it, because that is also maybe a first step of healing if you're not quite in the zone of recognizing that you need a healing journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it speaks volumes of not being afraid of your thoughts, whether it's buying land or, you know, a lot of the times we just suppress our thoughts like, oh, I can't do that. And then it's gone. But
Yep.
maybe that's not a thought. Maybe that's your heart calling to you. Maybe that's nature connecting with you. A lot of times we hear things like you are what you eat. Well, what if you eat a lot of mushrooms? What if you're eating a whole food diet? Doesn't that make you part of the planet if you are what you eat? And might that make you see the world in a different way if you're not eating processed food versus eating food that comes from the land? And I think it speaks volumes of a lot of the processed food goes to the cities, which is like a concrete jungle.
Yep.
And it's interesting how you're like, wow, if you feed a person this particular diet, they live this particular lifestyle, or vice versa. I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but the same thing is like, wow, it sure seems like people that live out in the nature, they seem to eat a little healthier. They seem to have a little bit different perspective on things. And, it's interesting how that happens. And, I agree. I think a lot of it comes back to fear, and whether it's the language we're using, whether it's the way we're living our life, and I think that psychedelics open you up to the confrontation of fear, and it makes confrontation, not a scary word. And that's what people should really try to face whatever fear they have. Start with a little fear, turn on the faucet a little bit, and it moves down that road. Yeah.
I like that idea. Yeah. Keep your hand on the tap so you can shut it off real quickly. But
right?
Yeah.
Just a little drop here. Okay, not that bad. A little
Yeah.
more. The next thing you know, you're having a drink. And next thing you know, the fear becomes you. And you realize you're dangerous. Your fear. Like it's like making my daughter a while back was like, oh, Dad, there's a monster in the closet. I'm like, I know. And he's very crazy. He's scared. She's like, what? And I'm like, but don't worry. He wants to be your friend. You got to make friends with him, because guess what? As scary as it is to you, once you make friends with him, now he hides in your closet and he protects you from all the bad people. And you always have him with you. Just make friends with him. And I think that that's something we all should do, is make friends with the monster, right? Like, yeah, he is a monster. Guess what? You're the monster, but make friends with him.
But see, I love that. That just shows what a good parent you are. But I love that also because as a child, I think we can embrace that.
Yeah.
And say, she might be like, hey, Dad or Daddy, whatever. But then she's like, oh, but but as an adult, we say, if you'd say that to me, Joy, I'm trying to think of an example, that crazy person in town, just avoid him because go make friends with him because he wants to be your friend. I'd be like, George, you're crazy. I've heard that guy mugs people or whatever.
Yeah.
And we start putting all these rationalizations on that. But as a child, we buy into it. It's like, oh, that's a kind of a cool idea to think about. And we don't have all these, we haven't built up decades of rationalizations. So again, I think that healing, back to, putting all these bows on it, but I think healing and psychedelics especially allows us to kind of bring back that childlike curiosity about ourselves, about the world, where we fit into that world.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so this ties right back to language. If we think about it as a child, we're given labels and language. If you're taught at a young age to read and write, and what is reading and writing is you look at a word and then you look at the letters. So you're really finding ways to analyze each particular symbol. And we give each letter its own name, and then we give it a word, and then we give it a sentence, and then we give it a paragraph. Like, if you think about the way that trains your mind to think, like it trains you to see yourself outside of yourself and as an individual not connected to anything. You're a letter in a word, in a sentence, in a paragraph, in a story, in a book. You know what I mean? Like, and it just it forces you to think like this linear path.
Yep.
But that is such a one-dimensional way of thinking, and it closes you off to the rest of the world.
Yep.
Like, why not think of yourself as the character, the lead character in the story, instead of thinking of yourself as a letter? Like, it's such a, and that gets us back to language, right? And I think that that's what psychedelics do, is they open you back up to redefining the world around you instead of seeing yourself as a symbolic letter in a grand story like that. So yeah, I agree. Psychedelics allow us to rediscover a world that we want to imagine ourselves in. And when you do that, there's no limitations on your life.
Yep.
You understand that you don't have to get up and go do this thing. You understand that you don't have to be these labels people put on you. You could be anything. And we haven't felt the feeling of being anything since we were a child. It's like our imagination has been stolen from us.
Yep. That's exactly right. Love it. Print it. It's true. Except for maybe a few artists and, all the people maybe in the creative fields, our creativity is often stifled pretty early on because of that narrow path, and even those, I remember, even as a kid, I'm trying to think, talking about, I want to be, I just want to live out in nature or whatever, or some non-job type thing. And I remember, family members saying, well, how are you going to support a family? And so, we get put on this narrow path. And the one word in one of my psychedelic experiences that, and maybe it was really hitting me on the head because it's pretty obvious now, but it wasn't then. It seemed profound in the journey, but it was, I was struggling with a bunch of issues in this one journey, and I thought they were unrelated. But again, the cool thing about psychedelics is like, oh no, let's look at this. And it ended with this pounding. Again, language, but it felt like a pounding on my head of perspective, change perspective. And so every time now I look at something, especially if it's negative, I just hear that word so strongly in my head still today. What am I missing? What's the flip side? What are they hiding? What's the fear? And so perspective, same thing. We have to change that perspective at times. We have to see it differently. We have to see our life differently, the path that was maybe chosen for us in some way.
Yeah.
I mean, we chose, but we were directed for sure, even if we think we chose it. And if nothing else, the psychedelics frees you of that one mindset to actually allow you to change and see different perspectives.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, and I think that this is one of the underlying messages of most psychedelic experiences. I had someone tell me once that, life's not trying to hurt us. It's just that life is a really good dancer, and we have two left feet. And it's so beautiful. I think it was Jorge Padron out of Miami. That guy's, he's a brilliant young guy, and people should check him out. But it makes sense. And I know for myself in my life where when, I have found myself wanting to stand up for integrity and doing the right thing. And when I did that, I was met with a lot of resistance. And, I got fired from my job for standing up for what I believe in. And at the time I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. But then all of a sudden I thought to myself, like, wow, wait a minute. I did something that I wanted to do. Maybe this is the world's way of rewarding me.
Yep.
And then like I went through this one scenario that I really like that I've been playing with. And it's like, I think that life is one big martial arts dojo. And at any point in time when you're ready to go to the next belt, you can. All you have to do is call over the master's attention and go through your katas. And if you do it right, you're going to get promoted to the next level. But sometimes getting promoted to that next level means leaving that dojo and going to another one. And you don't get to see, if you pass the test, you don't get to say, you don't have any say in what the promotion looks like.
Right.
You just get promoted. So what if these things you think are a tragedy are in fact a promotion? What if, okay, you've demonstrated to me, George, that you're willing to stand up to authority. I got a bigger job for you. Come with me. And you're like, but wait, I'm losing all this. And you're like, no, you're not, knucklehead. You're being promoted.
Yeah.
And I think people can use that metaphor in their life. What if this tragedy that you think happened to you is actually a promotion? What if you're just, hey, something bigger than you imagine said, this person has it, come with me. Like, that's what's happening in life. And I really believe that. Like, these things that are happening to us are because you've passed a test and you've graduated, and now we need you for bigger and better things. Come with me. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that, yeah, I think any uncomfortable moment in your life is a chance to kind of look into it.
Right.
And uncomfortable from light to, all the way to trauma, obviously.
Yeah.
I agree. I think, just as you were talking, I was thinking we get lulled into being comfortable. We get lulled into thinking this is what life's about. If your job, like, you worked that job for a number of years and you were comfortable in it, you liked the people and all that. And, it wasn't until, as we all have experienced, some bad bosses come in, but when we're comfortable, we're like, well, don't rock the boat. I'm happy here. I'm okay. And I think you're right. I think that again, whatever we want to call it, universe, divine, God, maybe does have these interruptions in our life to try to wake us up.
Yeah.
And if we just say, oh no, I'm scared, I'm fearful, or that doesn't mean anything, or I'll just find a new job, screw them. I don't, instead of like, ooh, this is a wake-up call.
Yeah.
And so I love that idea. I like that. Looking for moments of discomfort as a sign maybe you need to start a healing journey. That's interesting.
Yeah. I think it's a road sign,
Yeah.
And if you're aware of it, so this just brings us back to the world of language and metaphors. Like, right? Like, and as someone who thoroughly understands the language, what a beautiful world it is when we can use language to describe a world we want to live in. And isn't it interesting that the only way you can come up with new knowledge is to reference old knowledge? And like, I think that that's something that maybe we could get into that for a minute. I love talking to you. This is really fun, but let me address some more of these comments right here.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
I'm so stoked on all these people. There's so many awesome ones in here.
Yeah.
So okay, guys.
Summer of love, yeah.
Dude, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ken, Aliana, Jeff, Bob, Rachel. I love you guys, man. You guys are so awesome. Here's Ken. George, you've been nipping into the site. You know this, Ken. Of course I'm talking to Rand. You know I'm a microdose when I'm talking to Rand. Come on. We're going to come back to we're going to come back to Bob's ideas about skepticism, because we're going to get into that. But I just want to address some more of these before we touch on that one, Bob. I love you too, Bob. You're an amazing human being.
Yeah, Bob's great.
Yeah. Rachel, psychedelics are in no way recreational for me, but I look forward to the day that they can be. And I use THC for exercise. She's probably in the sauna right now listening to this, Rachel.
I love her posts are crazy, but I love her. I love that she's on that healing journey.
Yeah.
And so it's fantastic.
I think this one's our friend Jeff right here. Great discussion about fear, George and Rand, fear acronyms. False evidence appearing real. Face everything and rack him. We should start writing them down.
Yeah, really. I like face everything and rise. Yeah.
I know. It's so amazing what we can do with our language. And we talked about how language is a way in which we can change the world around us, because your language changes your inner dialogue as well, too. And I think acronyms can play a big part in that. Need to play ball with the FDA overlords, and that's the price of admission. Woo! That's it.
We can spend the whole podcast just on that topic.
Yep. Ken, Jeff Wilner, CPM. Of course, absolutely. I concur with all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Oliana, after one of my plant experiences, my own therapist was shocked at how quickly I made progress between two of our sessions. Plant medicine is not a magic pill, but it definitely feels that way. So I can see why someone would promote it as a magic pill. They're passionate and most have good intentions. I mean, they are called magic mushrooms,
Right.
you know?
I love this. I just want to talk about this for a second.
Please do.
This is, again, for those that are fearful of psychedelics, this is a great testimonial because, and I think a lot of the therapists that are now working with psychedelics or hoping to would agree with this completely. There's an old, I think one of the first things I heard when I was getting into psychedelics was, oh yeah, taking psychedelics is like having 7 years of therapy or something like that. And it's not that, but it's this, just what she says. It allows you between sessions to almost prep for the next one because you see stuff and then you can take it that you maybe were totally unaware of, especially with childhood trauma, because again, our childhood brain doesn't know how to process it. So what it basically does is just puts it away somewhere else where we don't want to see it. And when we do see it, we call those triggers. It forces a reaction and we push it further down. So with plant medicine, it, as we've talked about earlier, allows us to see something and maybe we don't quite understand it, or maybe, and that's again why it's so important to have integration or therapy, because then you can go talk it out and say, so it's not just an echo chamber in your head. It's, well, this is what I experienced, and these are the imagery or whatever, and this is what I think it means, but I'm looking for feedback. And I think so. This is exactly for those who are looking for that know they have trauma and know they need healing and want to work with a therapist. The plant medicine goes hand in hand with the therapy wonderfully.
Yeah, and I love what you said right here, because it does. To me, I would like to speak to the magic of it. And to me, what the magic of it is that you're consuming part of nature. And when you do that, you see yourself as nature. And that helps you thoroughly understand that you're part of something bigger. And when you can do that, I think that opens you up to processing information in a different way. So much of us, and maybe it comes back to the idea of language and letters and words in a sentence. We see ourselves as an individual, and we've been conditioned to see ourselves that way since we were children.
Yep.
So of course, when there's a problem, we're going to blame ourselves, and then we're going to dislike everyone around us because we dislike ourselves. But when you ingest the plant medicine, it's almost like you get the chance to become part of nature and see yourself as nature and part of the whole again. And when you do that, you realize that, oh, generational trauma. Hey, look, I'm this tree that fell from a seed on top of this big tree. Of course, I'm going to grow in the same area. Of course, I'm going to have the same characteristics. I'm the same kind of tree. Hey, well, look at where the tree bends over here. Okay, maybe I should try to grab some sunlight over here. And you really begin to open up to this idea that you're bigger than this walk from the hospital to the graveyard. And you can process information that way in a different light. To me, that's the magic that is in there. And I don't know. It's such a beautiful way to look at it. I'm glad she said that.
Well, coming back to what you said earlier, George, the indigenous, like you said, for a long, long time, the shaman, the medicine person, man, woman, would do the psychedelic and then help heal the community. But look at the difference between Western, as you just said, individual. Yeah. We are individual.
Right.
And the indigenous, it's community. It's community. We're all in this together. And so I think that's why why they didn't have to take the medicine, because they were all already in tune with nature, in tune with themselves, in tune with the community. One person wasn't better than the other. In the Western model, who's going to make their first, you're 50, you only made your first $1 million. What are you? You're a slacker, and it's all this individual stuff. So you're right. So I think that's why we have to take the psychedelics, because we've been so programmed to be separate from nature, separate from community, and building our own little fiefdom, our own little silo. that the psychedelic shatters that silo
Yeah.
and says, well, yeah, I mean, I love when I hear someone tell me, I smoked my 5-MeO DMT and I was shot into space and I saw the universe and I was nothing and I was everything.
Mhm.
And that's the common thing. Most people say I was nothing and I was everything. And it's like, and it was the worst experience, but the best experience. I'm like, how could that possibly be? And I haven't, that's a medicine I haven't done myself. And I go back and forth. Is the medicine calling me or is the medicine scaring me? I'm not sure which, but I love that sense of back to what you said about individuals, because if no other psychedelic does, that one certainly does, because it shatters you into a million pieces and says, you're throughout the universe, you're throughout nature, but then it puts you back together and says, okay, now that you realize this, go forth and it sounds crazy, but that, so I love that. Yeah, I think that's why we have to take psychedelics, because we have become so separated from nature and from community and from uh, you know uh, I know there are some people that still have multi-generational people living
Yeah.
in their property, but
Yeah.
most of us don't. Most of us, our parents or grandparents live completely different places. Our kids live other places, and so it's that's also a way of fracturing that community.
Yeah. It's when you talked about 5-MeO DMT, it 5-MeO DMT is like being a scholar of the Charles Dickens novel, A Tale of Two Cities, for Lifetime, but you do it in like 10 seconds. It's the best times, the worst of times. You just become a Charles Dickens scholar in like 30 seconds. That's so funny.
Exactly.
But yeah, when we think of the West, like, and I'm confident that this was done purposely on some level. The people that are in charge of society tried this experiment. We're like, hey, why don't we, as a community? And I think that this was the foundation of, let's send our people to let's send our parents to an old folks home. Let's send our kids to school, and we'll send the people to work. Like, in a weird way, this was based on, why don't we let the community help everybody, and we'll let everybody do that. But that system has failed, be it corruption, be it greed, but I'm sure it was based on a good idea when it began. But as someone who lived that life and found it so incredibly empty, and then I moved to Hawaii and I saw the way in which generational families live, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. There's so much more wisdom a parent or a grandparent has with a child than a new set of parents. Like, as a new set of parents, man, you're like, oh, I don't know what to do with this thing. And you freak out and you're tired and you're fighting because the kid doesn't sleep and you and your wife are at each other's throats. But if you have a grandparent that lives there, they're like, you come here, dummies. Why don't you go away for a little bit? We got them. We got you. Yep. And here's what you do when that happens. Here's how you do it. Like, we have decided that on some level that wisdom can be taken out of the family, but and maybe it can, but it just doesn't work as good. It's so much better when you have people around you in a family that love you, and it's a better world that way. So
and I love the wisdom being passed down. That's a beautiful idea.
Yeah. And we see where we are without it. Like, we get in trouble without it.
Yeah. Whoa!
This is beautiful. Today's conversation is so delectably, scrumptiously delicious, edibly tasty, good, and filled with nuggets of wisdom, kindness, goodness, patience, encouragement, empathy, understanding, sincerity, perseverance, knowledge, honesty, love, hope, courage, tenacity, awesomeness, caring, positively, compassion, passion, inspiration, resilience, respect, appreciation, gratitude, enthusiasm, guidance, and motivation. I don't know if there's ever been a more beautiful sentence put together.
Speaking of language, there you go. Wow.
Right? You encapsulated everything possible right there.
Yeah.
Here comes
one. I think, George, I think that's both our goals. I mean, we have more to strive for there, but I think that's what this is about. It is trying to share our knowledge, share our experience, and be generous with we're on this healing journey, and we just want others to be on that healing journey as well. So I love and I appreciate Ken so much for those
Yeah.
words, because again, words are words, but words can motivate, and I think these are quite motivational.
Yeah, I think every one of those could be a meditation. I'm going to write them
Yeah,
down. I think there's almost 30 there. Like you could have one for
yeah.
every day. Just wake up and read one. Thank you, Ken.
There you go.
Ken, you should make a calendar of this, and we could all put it on our calendar and wake up every
Yeah,
morning and just say it out loud. This one comes from Jeff. Indigenous cultures and native people rely upon prayer, ceremony, song, and dance. Or maybe this is LinkedIn user.
yeah,
Primarily, and then psychedelics are utilized in only a few ceremonies. Yeah.
yeah,
It speaks to the power of the medicine, like how, and the community too, like you were saying.
yeah.
Here's another good
Yeah, and
one
by the
too.
way, song and dance are great modalities for healing too. Somatics, getting out there, shaking it out, wonderful.
Yeah, there's something to be said about the way in which you can move your body that is medicinal in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
And something so seductive and beautiful about dance too that
yeah,
puts you in a different state, right?
yeah.
The realization you are broken is the beginning of your healing path. That's well said.
Yeah.
I think we've all been there before. And it's hard. It's hard to come to the realization because we don't want to believe it, right?
Right, right. Because again, we're programmed to succeed.
Yeah.
Whatever that success term means. But and I always ask my students that when I was teaching, I had first year students, and I would say, "Okay, you're in college. What's your definition of success?" And there's a lot of different definitions, but all programmed by it's like, well, get a good job, get a good
Right.
college education, get a good job, have a family, all these things. We're programmed to do these things, and so I think that leads into us to being able to deny being broken, because no, we were promised all these things. We were promised a good job. We were, not
Yeah.
but in our upbringing, we were promised that, and so I think that's sometimes why it's so shocking at times, because we push away, I'm not broken, I'm fine, and then you hit that wall.
Yeah.
And you smash your face against the glass, or you break through the glass and do more harm. And so I think, yeah, the realization you're broken, but I think sometimes it takes about 10 times getting you there for some people, because we're so programmed to say, I'm not broken, to hide that brokenness.
Yeah.
I think, Jenny and I talk a lot about um, marketing to women, because she's quite sensitive to that issue, and I am as well. And first it was all the airbrushing, and now they have these AI models
Yeah.
that aren't
All the
even
filters.
real,
Yeah.
that look like perfect. And so she and many women struggle with this. Here's this image of perfection put on by marketers and advertising, and here's the reality, and oh, I must be broken because I don't look like that, I don't act like that, and so there are all these things going on with society. We have to figure out how to separate ourselves from that, so we can have this moment of, I'm broken, but it's okay. And then we add your part to that, which is, because once I'm on this healing path, I'll find, not enlightenment, that sounds too woo-woo also, but I'll find myself. Maybe that's a better one.
That's perfect. Because I think I think that the term "I am broken" means the programming doesn't work for me. And like if you just think about it, like when you had asked your students about the definition of success, what they are giving you is someone else's conditioning.
Yep.
And right. And it's everywhere. We have gotten away from creativity. Production is, creativity stripped of its imagination. And that's why when we see something new, we're like, oh, it's so original, because we're all just stay in your lane, just be programmed. Like that's what people that scream about production want, is they want people just to be focused and do this one thing. But when you do that, it's just this like flavorless vanilla. Like that flavorless vanilla sucks, man. We should be doing original, creative things. And I think psychedelics lends us back our creativity. It leads us back to, why are you broken? Well, you're broken because you're not being your authentic self. And that's the feelings of tragedy that are weighing on you. That's the brokenness is your soul screaming to you, be yourself. Come on, man. Have the courage to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
But you feel broken when you don't listen to your soul, man. And I think that's what it kind of comes back down to. It's a crying out for authenticity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was probably broken for 20 plus years, not realizing or not wanting to admit it. And like I said, it wasn't until, and I, probably had, if I look back now and we're totally honest, I probably had other moments of acting out before that final crescendo that showed me, okay, no, there's something wrong. And then the nature came up. But so, yeah, so don't, so my point there is just telling people you can start that healing journey anytime, whether you're 22 right now and realize you're broken, or whether you're 92 and realize you're broken. A healing journey. I'm thankful every day that, I wish I had that healing journey, in my 20s? Yes. Am I extremely happy that I had that healing journey and live this life now? Yes. And I don't have a time machine, and I'm happy with this life now. But just don't be discouraged if you realize today, after this podcast, wow, I am broken. I'm not living my authentic life. Whatever age you are, you can start that healing journey today.
Yeah, I think Aliana sums it up here pretty good when she says, I think technically everybody is ready and everybody can benefit.
Yeah.
But I also think if they can't accept it, they might have healing to do. That's an indication we shouldn't really recommend psychedelics. Yeah, it's a good point. And I think it echoes what we were saying earlier about everybody has stuff they can work on, but when they're ready, they'll find the teacher that's right for them. And maybe that means finding an underground teacher. Maybe that finds a clinical setting. Maybe everybody's finds the teacher that they're looking for.
Well, and that goes back to what Tom DiNardo said earlier, and also said I think on your podcast, which is, that message is always coming to us.
Yeah.
You can heal, but so many of us are tied up in our day-to-day lives. We're not listening to that message. We're blocking it out, or we're filtering it out. Perception, that perception, that's a whole nother podcast we could talk about. But, that lens we use to, we're bombarded by stimuli. And so we have to do something to narrow that so we can function.
Yeah.
And, blocking out anything negative is the easiest thing to do to keep us living day to day.
Yeah, it comes back to the ego and the threat detector, right?
Yep.
And if we don't block it out, we can rationalize it and be like, well, it's this, this, and this, it's because that person doesn't like me, or it's, whatever reason you're telling yourself, it's easy to spin it in a way that allows you to continue living a life without adversity. So it's kind of a trippy thing to see.
Yeah.
Another acronym for us, the EPIC principle, every person in charge of themselves. What do you think, Rand?
Interesting. I agree with that. I think I'm trying to think how I'm picturing that. I mean, on the outskirt, on the surface, I totally agree with that. And I think that's part of the healing process too. We can't expect our doctor to heal us. We can't expect our therapist to heal us. We have to do it ourselves. We can do it with assistance.
Yeah. But
we're in charge of it.
Yeah, it's a great point. And Lori, thanks for chiming in, Lori. This is something that I think you do figure out when you're on your path. And some hit at 20, 30, some hit at 50, but hindsight is 20/20, and you don't realize it was a sign until later. Like, that's so true. Like, I the way I see it, Lori, sometimes is like you're on this path and then you wind your way up to this foothill and then you look down and you're like, oh, no wonder I felt that way. No wonder I felt like I was going to fall off the cliff, because it was like this narrow. Of course I would have felt like that. Like, yeah, I should have done that. That was a good thing to do, to climb on right there. it's an interesting take. What's your take on seeing signs later in life in 2020?
I think probably that's the vast majority of time, because we're
Yeah.
not tuned in, especially if we're not healed. We're just not tuned into it.
Yeah.
You know, I just probably talking about Jenny too much today, but just a funny little aside. When we first met, I knew immediately she was going to be a friend in my life, but I thought it was just going
Mhm.
to be a friend. I didn't think anything more. And, you know, we look back in hindsight now and we start cracking up, because that lasted about 3 months. And then all of a sudden we had a random encounter to meet. We weren't, you know, we were living, I don't know, couple thousand miles apart. And so it's like, oh, we'll just have a, you know, fun friend like you, Jordan, unless I get to a hot Hawaii, you know,
Yeah.
good friend, you know, key friend, but just a friend. And then we had this bizarre random meeting that you could not explain in a million years. It's just not even possible.
Right.
And again, I didn't have any expectations except to say, oh, wow, this is going to be great. Get to hug her and say hi. And we touched hands, and both of us, the electricity just went off the roof, off the charts. And so in hindsight, we're like, how did this meeting even happen? But we look at it and we say, you know, again, there's whatever we want to call it, some divine, creative, conscious power, whatever we want to call it. There's some power that brought us together, because in that we both helped each other heal, and then both also formed this amazing partnership and this wonderful life that we live, that we filled with joy and gratitude. But I you know, I didn't see all that stuff happening
Yeah.
until after the fact. So yeah, I think so much of it, when we're healed, though, I think you're right. I think now that we're in this healing journey, we can sometimes see that miracle or that sign happening,
Yeah.
because we're already partway up that hill, maybe, rather than being at the top and having to look down and say, "Ah, yeah." I love that analogy. That's beautiful. But yeah, I agree. I think that Lori is right. And so, but that's okay. I think I don't think. I think the key is just listening.
Yeah.
Like with, again, buying that land. I still can't tell you why I did it. Again, I just it was this need. I think I realized, I looked at my life and I looked at who the main mask or person was, and I didn't like it. And some would say, "Oh, that you escaped," and well, yeah, I did. That was part of it. I escaped that environment, but it wasn't the environment that was causing it. It was me
Yeah.
that was affecting the
Yeah.
environment. And so, so I listened. It wasn't logical. I'm sure, like I said, everyone told me I was crazy, but I followed that. So somehow we have to work in there that, yeah, it is hindsight, and you won't know why did I buy this land, but then years later you will realize that you will realize, you know, what, oh, that was part of the healing journey. So um, I guess I'd just say, yeah, this is the case, Lori, but just try to be open to signs as much as you can, and especially if they're repeated signs, like, you know, with ayahuasca, people say, oh, I just saw this podcast on ayahuasca, and then someone randomly says, oh, have you heard about ayahuasca? And then someone else says, hey, I just came back from an ayahuasca retreat. Kind of sounds like ayahuasca is calling you to maybe investigate a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. So sometimes it maybe takes us a couple signs to hit us over the head, but when we're still in that fractured state. But yeah, just look for the signs, and I think hindsight's okay. I think it's okay to be, you know, as long as we follow them, as long as we try to follow them.
Yeah. I love I love what Lori said. And if she's still in the comments, I'm curious, and I'll probably DM her about this, but
Yeah.
I'm curious to what she thinks about 2020 and the realization of signs as a relationship with spirituality, because sometimes we use the word sign
Hmm.
in spirit, or sign as in, I know omen has a negative connotation, but like
Hmm.
a sign or something from bigger than us. And
Yeah.
when you do look back on your past, you can see it as a sign of grace. Like, oh man, that was a miracle that happened. So if you're Lori, if you're still here, let me know what you think about that. I'm curious. Here's the reason why when we talk about great teams, Aliana says Bufo is an amazing, and yes, the worst and best sums it up. And
I like the little emoji too.
Yeah. And that's followed right up with Jeff that says, if I didn't know any better, I'd swear Bufo is the name of a muscle tea brand. It's so funny. Here's a good one from Ron. He says, universities and professors worldwide have tested thoroughly more than 150 medicinal plants. And Malotira Sederateris S is the best of the best. Haven't you heard? I don't know anything about that. I'll have to look it up. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know either. I do.
Malotira.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up too. I just know I went to a conference and they had this Native American speaker. And, he was basically saying, we non-natives are kind of stupid. And because we've lost this knowledge. And, and he's saying it in a polite way, but, the truth is there. There are all these amazing medicinal plants and minerals for that matter. And, vitamins and supplements have been poo-pooed for years by, again, the Western sort of medical model. But I'm a firm believer that there are numerous medicinal plants. And so, I'm after the podcast, I'm definitely going to look this up.
Yeah, I'm going to order some. I'm going to put it in my garden. Here's another one from Lori where she talks about, I think this is the point in which we were talking about the way society is set up and we put our older folks in homes and our kids. And she says, without it, kids look to peers instead of the older experienced people, not looking up to anyone. Yeah. If you're just looking adjacent, like, you're just looking sideways, and a lot of people live their life moving sideways instead of moving up. It's a pretty interesting idea there.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of misinformation comes from peers that way as well, so. And then the other thing too is the comparison syndrome. If you're focused on your peers, there's also this, well, I have to be like them or oh, they have more knowledge than me, I need to catch up, or I'm not as smart as them.
Right.
And so having the grandparents and I love how some people talk about their aunties, mine were aunts. They were, straight-laced aunts, but I love when you talk about aunties and, oh, the aunties took care of me and changed my diaper. And I'm like, that just sounds so beautiful. And so, I love, again, we lost that model of having that wisdom that I'm sure we all rolled our eyeballs at some of the wisdom that was given to us as kids, but still wisdom. And it's probably some of that stuff today we don't roll our eyebrows. In fact, probably some of the stuff we tell our kids.
Yep, guaranteed.
Afterwards, maybe, oh, wait, did I roll my eyeballs at that when I was a kid?
Yeah.
But that wisdom is there. So I love that. Yeah. Thanks.
It's Laura. I'm super stoked. If we shift gears, Bob had a comment a while back about the skepticism, which I know that you had written a recent article. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So someone on that post that I did said this great thing, and she's like, well, maybe the next article can be like a list of who these skeptics are. And I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. And I was like, I don't know if there are different types of skeptics, but it's fascinating to me because I think, like my brother-in-law that I mentioned, who I mentioned earlier, I think if I looked at his skepticism, I think his would be closed mind. He's a brilliant guy, but I think sometimes brilliant minds close themselves off because they're so brilliant. They think, I had this thought, it must be brilliant, so it must be true.
Yeah.
And so I think at least one of the skeptics in my mind are the I know better, or I've already made the decision and my knowledge. But I would that's why I put my email address in that article. I'm like, skeptics, please email me. I want to hear why you are skeptics, maybe for a future article, but that wasn't the reason.
Yeah.
I just want to have a discussion with them because I have heard, the the war on drugs lingo spit back at me as the reason why I don't want to fry my brain. I don't want to have birth defects. I've heard that. I've heard uh, they're dangerous, but I don't know how else people are skeptics. Are they skeptics because it's not coming from their doctor? Um, and I think they should have pretty healthy skepticism about their doctors, but that's a whole nother topic too. But so I don't know, George, do you have ideas for, I mean, you've talked to a lot of people too. Um, Most of the time, like if someone's a skeptic, they just don't talk about it. It's like the pin drop. It's just a silence. They just, so I don't know. But what about you? What's your experience with it?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what there is to be skeptical about. It works. Maybe I would say the majority of people who are skeptical are people who have never tried psychedelics. Now we need to
Well,
break it
yes.
down.
Yeah.
We need to break it down into, okay, are you skeptical that
Okay.
psilocybin won't work for manic depressives? I could see something like that. Are you skeptical that um, psychedelics may not be the best possible remedy for depression? Okay. Are you skeptical that it may not make people more like, what are the exact arguments skeptics have? But
Yeah.
if we just, as an encompassing whole, if people are skeptical about psychedelics, I would say that person's never taken it, because it is scientifically 100% true that if you take psychedelics at a big enough dose, you're going to have an experience. I'm not going to tell you what that experience will be, but it's repeatable and it happens every single time. So there's nothing to be skeptical about it not doing something to you. We could debate what it's a remedy for, but I don't think there's any room for a skeptical argument about psychedelics don't do anything. They do something all the time and it's repeatable. So what exactly is, like, what do you have an exact argument people are saying about being skeptical about?
To me, I say it's more, they're definitely all non-users.
Right.
That's for sure. But I don't know if it's a cultural thing. I just had a discussion last night. This woman was putting her daughter was going on antidepressants, and so I did my nosy thing that I do, which sometimes gets me in trouble. I said, "Well, antidepressants were really only designed for a deep depressive episode. And you take them for a few days until that episode passes, and then you're done." I said, they're not supposed to be a lifetime daily drug that you take. And her response is, well, that's what the doctor prescribed. And so there's where we need the skepticism.
Right.
So I don't know where the disconnect is. I really think from my discussions, the disconnect is they have heard 50 years, and especially if they have children who then are in the DARE program also, they've heard this constant barrage that, and because psychedelics are lumped with all these other cocaine, bath salts, heroin, all this bizarre stuff, Quaaludes, which is, when I saw that on the list, it's like, okay, who's used that term? Were we back in the 80s or something?
Right.
But Quaaludes on that list too. But there's no skepticism about that because it's been so programmed into us that there's no medicinal value. And that's why I also get back to the language thing. I get so upset. I'm happy about it, but I get so upset when people call psychedelics emerging or new,
Right.
because no, they've been used since time immemorial, probably. We have ancient cave drawings with the magic mushroom in the cave, and we have ergot, the foundational elements of LSD in ancient Greek chalices. And so we have this evidence of psychedelic use forever. And And so, but yet somehow in these last 50 years, we've erased all that. We've forgotten that. Um, I think there's also maybe a slight, for some people, prejudice that, well, the indigenous doesn't count because it wasn't being studied, as you said. We weren't studying the brains,
Right.
No, you're right. We should be studying the outcomes. Yes,
Right.
look how many people are healing. But
Yeah.
no, we're looking at the brain function, and so, but I think the brain function will be a way to bring people into it, because there are those people that say, oh, well, if it does that to the brain, then I'm okay with it, versus the kind of the woo woo stuff that we talk about, that, well, everyone is your brother. Once you take a psychedelic, everyone is your brother and sister, and we're all part of nature. And people are like, whoa, no, yeah, the crunchy granola crowd. No, I don't want to be part of that. And that's not what we're saying. I mean, so again, language.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to figure that out. But I think that's where the skepticism comes from. It's from that medical model. Uh, that if the FDA approved it, it has to be gold standard, which we know is certainly not the case.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I deprogramming. So skeptics, I think, have just been programmed to, at least the ones I've talked to, are mostly been programmed by the negativity that we've been told about these psychedelics, which have just been lumped in with the cocaine and the heroin and things like that, which are much more dangerous. I try to tell people again, and they talk about that, death, and I say, I'll give them the thing, more people, the multiplier of how many people die by alcohol every year. I think that number is, I don't have it in front of me, but it's 500,000 or 600,000 people die from alcohol-related causes every year. Psychedelics, we use the number under 20, and I think that's even high. I haven't heard of anyone die from psychedelics. I've heard of other, some tragic things with psychic trauma, but not physical trauma. And so we have to get away from that. We have to show them these statistics that, no, these are not dangerous medications at all. These are enlightening medications. These are healing medications. These are, I think of, I'm a Christian in a way I define Christianity, but I love it when someone who is, there's no God, there's nothing after this life. We live and we die, and that's it. We're not spiritual creatures. We're just physical entities that think we have a spiritual presence. And then they do a psychedelic and they come back and they say, oh my God, I saw God.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. And they can't explain it. There's no logic to it. They can't. And they say, wow, I'm kind of embarrassed by all those years where I was saying those things. He said, it's still not Christianity or Judaism or whatever it might be, but I see the world is connected. I see there's this bigger thing. And I think, again, that's what psychedelics do. And people don't, but that again gets to that woo-woo side of things where I think a lot of people want a logical argument rather than a spiritual argument but I want to know. So anyone who's a skeptic on here, please, share it with George, share it with me. I want to know, because I that can help us tune our discussion with the people and find a way to, because again, I know, George, you said that you don't, we're not there to make people heal, but if we can at least show them a window.
Yeah.
Get them to open the window for them, let them look out, and they can close the window if they want to, but at least get the window open.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're a skeptic, please tell me why. I would love to know.
Yeah. Here is first. Let me address Lori. Thank you, Lori, for chit chatting with us. Still,
yeah.
She wanted to come back. I'd asked her about the
Yeah.
idea of signs of spirituality. She said, I'm here. What I meant by signs is whatever it is that is pulling you in a different direction from the path you're on now. no matter how used to it you are. That makes total sense. And I think it speaks volumes of where you're at in your life, Lori, to be able to understand signs like that. And I think that a lot of people aren't there yet, where they don't see them as signs. I think that's a step up when you start to beginning to hear things or see things or understand relationships in a way. I think it speaks volumes of where you're at in life, and I hope more people can get there, because when you can see things as signs, then you know what direction you're going in, right?
Yeah. And too many people just push them aside.
Yeah. Right.
Just a blip of the matrix, move on. It's like, oh no, maybe you should be paying attention to that blip. Yeah, great.
And I believe that the world is talking to us. And so I'm glad she said that. And I think that I'll tie this into skepticism too. I think that once you begin to understand that you're part of the whole, that you can see language everywhere. You can see language in the plants that grow in your garden. You can see, and here's something that I'll tie it to skepticism. In my garden, I'm growing I have a cool shamanic garden. And one of my plants is the Psychotropia viridis, which is one of the plants you mix with ayahuasca.
Yep.
However, where I planted with it, all of a sudden I noticed the leaves started getting really dark. And then I looked down and there was all these ants, and the ants were making scales. So they would siphon out the nutrients and they would make scales, and then they would take it down. And I was watching that, and I'm like, holy cow, this medicinal plant is showing me what's going on in the medical system. It's not a bug, it's a feature. And that's what I'm skeptical about with psychedelics. I don't think that there's enough people in the world of medicine that want it to change. They don't want it to change.
No.
It's an industry. It's a system.
Yep.
And I'm not saying all people are like this,
right?
But I believe wholeheartedly that what would happen if we change medicine? You know, people would lose their jobs. You think the pharmaceutical industries want it to change? They run it. They create the textbooks to give to the schools to teach the things that they want. It's an industry. We love people being addicted. Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. Your life is broken. Come and take this pill. You're on it for life. Now you can go back to work and work at this crappy job, take our medicine, work in our factories, make us rich. The world is run on fear and despair. And when people start having psychedelic experiences, what they realize is holy cow, I don't want to be in this anymore.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why that's why in the 60s it was shut down. People were like, dude, we're not doing it anymore. And I really think and this is in some ways I feel like I'm a fractal part of the 50s and 60s happening. I get why Leary did what he did. I get it. He's like, I'm just gonna put it in the water then. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. And I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but I understand that point of view now. It's oh, this is what the people in positions of authority want. It's not a bug, it's a feature. And the fact that I can look at my Psychotropia virida plant and see it happening, that's the world telling me, hey, George, you want to know what's happening? This is it. And so I was like,
wow.
What I ended up doing, and this killed me to do, is I chopped it I left the roots in there, but I chopped it because I'm like, it's never going to grow. I have to replant it. But the thing was you have to plant by the leaf. But that's what I mean. The language is in the world around us. If you want to know what's happening, go look in your garden, and the answers are right there being revealed to you. So I'm skeptical about change. I love the PS science. I love the ideas that we should be exploring every avenue. But I don't think there's a big enough groundswell for change because it disrupts too much of the status quo. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I love Dr. Rick Barnett and Dr. Gabor Mate and others, because here they are practicing or had practiced Western medicine, but saying we realize the model is flawed. And I would say more than flawed, but they were in the systems. They have to say it nicely.
Right.
How many people know that the pharmaceutical companies fund the CDC?
Regulatory
how many people know that there's a revolving door between pharmaceutical companies and the FDA?
Right.
It's I don't think a lot of people know that. So they're saying, oh, the FDA approved it, so it must be, and my doctor recommended it, so it must be right. Well, no. It's definitely a broken system. And it's broken when there are pharmaceutical drugs that are prescribed to deal with the side effects of the drug you're currently taking. It's like, okay, now I have to take another drug because this drug that I'm taking. And so if that doesn't give you pause, I don't know what does, because again, yeah. So that's one step of it. Well, I want to mention nature in another way.
Yeah, do it.
So I have a this new book coming out. And I have a guy named TJ whose story is in the book, and he tells us. And it sounds like ego, and it's not, but it's funny, I think, and I'll tell my version of my story of that. But he said he was in Big Bend National Park, which is one of my favorite national parks. Gorgeous place in Texas. Probably my only place in Texas I would ever visit. Sorry, people in Texas, but it's this beautiful place. And he was in this weekend of a meditation, quiet time, just by himself. And he looked up and he saw this mountain in the distance, and he said, "Hey, that looks kind of like an ancient volcano." He said, "I'm just going to meditate here and see if it'll erupt while I'm here." And he went into this meditation. When he opened his eyes, he thought he saw a little bit of smoke by the mountain. And he was like, "No, I'm not saying I caused anything," but he said, "I think that's the power that we have of seeing things differently,
Yeah.
or making things happen." And my version of that story is, especially right now, we have wild quail on our property, and they're all having little cubbies, little babies, chicks. And so I'll sit on in my morning meditation, I'll have my coffee, and I'll be sitting there, and I'll be, I would love to see some quail today. Now, granted, there are like probably 100 quail throughout my property. I mean, so the likelihood, so again, I didn't cause that, but 9 times out of 10, when I have that intention, all of a sudden I see or hear the quail come. And so I think that's what you're getting at, is that when we get better in tune, when we're on this healing journey, we get better in tune with nature, these things happen that we don't see or notice normally because we're not in tune with it.
Yeah.
But once we're in tune with it, we see that plant, we see those ants going up in there, and we see for not only what it's doing to that plant, but what it means in a broader context of life, as you just described. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and maybe that speaks to the idea of faith, because sometimes faith is things that we can't really explain. But what if we're seeing examples of what's about to happen in our lives in nature, and we don't know, but we just feel like maybe that's a sign. Maybe we're back to what Lauren was saying.
Lauren
like
said, yeah.
Maybe those signs are signs of things to come, and like that corresponds with faith. And like that's why people can be so comfortable with uncertainty, is that they see signs they don't know how to verbalize, so they know things are going to be okay. And like what would the world look like if we lived in a place where people had the faith to be their authentic self? Like, man, it would just open up so many more doors. And I think healing would begin to happen naturally. Maybe, how about this? Maybe the same way the earth can rewild itself and reclaim its beautiful nature, so too can we as humans reclaim our authentic selves if we just stop with the conditioning. The same way people have to clear cut the ground in order to make it, create their own things. What if we just let it go? Like, what if we just let our lives go? I bet you it would be better than what we have right now. People are constantly trying to say like, "Oh, this is going to break. It's going to break. Let it go." I bet you life would be better if we let a lot of these things go. I bet you there'd be less suffering if we let a lot of these ridiculous regulations and corporations just let them have their way with us. Like, that's ridiculous. So,
see, let me try to further explain why I love you. So at the beginning of your podcast, I mean, I will try to watch the beginning of every podcast if I can. I don't necessarily watch the whole podcast because I love your beginning and you're into the motion and you were talking about this. And I just love that because that's you.
Yeah.
I love that you are you. I can't tell you how many times, on one hand, we're told conflicting messages. We are told, be who you're meant to be or whatever. But on the other hand, we're often told, especially by parents or family members or whatever, oh, don't let anyone see you behave like that. Don't let anyone see your true self. So I love that what you just said. Don't be afraid to, when we're healing, we're not afraid to be our true selves.
Yeah.
You know,
That's a good point.
such a great, you said that perfectly, George, because yeah, we are, because I've been told, don't let that crazy out of the bag. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, it's who I am. But for years, and that limits us too. I think that actually is trauma. I think
Yeah.
that's actually trauma, because it's telling us, don't be us. Be this example of what a good boy or a good girl or a good young man or whatever, good adult, whatever it might be. We're told this is what it looks like. Well, I'm not that.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
If I want to, like, one of my weird things is I love bathrobes, and if I could be in a bathrobe doing this podcast, I would be doing it right now. And any hotel I go to where there's a bathrobe, it's like 5-star. But I wouldn't. Other people are like, oh my God, you can't let people see you in your bathrobe. How ridiculous is that? And so so we're constantly told, don't be yourself, but don't be yourself. And it's this conflicting message that we face. And I think that when we're told don't be yourselves, I think it's meant in a loving way. Don't show you're crazy, so to speak, but in a way that traumatizes us, because it changes us. Oh, I can't be that way. Why is laughing loudly frowned upon? I like to laugh. Why is that a bad thing? But again, especially if we're told that as children, we don't understand that. Oh, I just better be quiet now and shut up. So wow, I love that. Don't be afraid to be ourselves.
Yeah. And it is scary because like you said, you're told not to do that, and then you're afraid that if you are yourself, you might fail, or people might not love you, or
Yep.
I think it kind of stems back to that. It's fascinating to think about.
Yeah.
Here's one for skepticism.
Okay.
It's from Jeff.
Good.
The main skeptic argument I've heard is that the mind altering properties are purely chemical and don't represent a window into something greater.
Wow.
Well, it's all chemical. I mean,
yeah.
But how would you combat that?
Again, as a scientist person, I think that is a debate. But from every story, every person I've now heard, I'd say probably at least 500 stories from people about psychedelics, is there's always some kind of broader experience. I call it spiritual or transformational. Not spiritual in the sense of, I mean, sometimes it's as spiritual as, Charles in his journey talks about, Jesus put his hand on my shoulder or something like that. So sometimes it's that, but other times, like I said, it's just an awakening that, as you mentioned, George, that we're not separate from this natural world. We are part of it, and some of the parts we're doing is pretty darn damaging, unfortunately. But we're changing, and we're learning, and nature is resilient. But I for the true, what I call the thinkers, the T's that need that proof, that comes back to faith. I don't know if there's a way to prove that you have outwardly, that you are, projected into the space and you have this crazy out of body experience. I don't know there's a way to prove that, but I have 100% faith in that, because I've heard these stories, and every story has a component of that in it. So that's how I believe it. But I don't know. How would you prove something like that? What's your thoughts on it, George?
Well, I would say that, to me, it doesn't matter how accomplished someone is or how articulate they are. If they have never tasted broccoli, they don't get an opinion on what broccoli tastes like. Like, oh, have you done it? Okay, then leave. Like, You can say whatever you want, but you have zero credibility unless you've done it. Zero. You have zero lived experience. Hey, please stand on the outside of the circle over here. You know what I mean? Like, it's not for you.
Yeah.
At any point in time, I'll invite you in to do it, and then you can give me your opinion about it. But if you haven't done it, then just stand over there and do some research. And I appreciate your contribution, but this conversation is not for you.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing over there. That's awesome. Thank you for that. It's relevant in a lot of ways, but it's not very meaningful or impactful in any sort of way there. But for someone who has done it, for someone who has done it and says that it's purely chemical, I would need him to drill down more on that. Like, it does just because something's chemical doesn't mean it's any less shades of true. You know, I mean, what is truth anyway? Truth is what you experience it to be. And my truth is different than someone else's. So, and I think that this is the problem they have. Like, they can't measure subjective results.
Right.
And for some reason, there's a part of our world that still thinks magical thinking is a problem. And I think it's gone the other way. I think we've gone from magical thinking being a problem to the scientific materialism being a problem. But that's how I guess I would combat it.
Yeah. And you know, I don't think there doesn't need to be something greater, I think, because to me, if you get that freedom from within to find your true self and find that healing, to me, that is the greatest benefit. There doesn't have to be a meeting with Jesus or a meeting with the aliens or a rocket ship to space. It doesn't have to be any of that. I mean, it has to be, but what happens is you see yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that nakedness is what we need. I have not had every psychedelic experience I've had has given me insights into myself that I could have gotten through, maybe some deep meditation or deep thinking or really, or, sweat lodge or something like that. But again, the benefit of psychedelics, it's relatively fast, depending on what psychedelic you take. But let's say psilocybin, 4 or 5 hour journey, unless you do a booster. And in that 4 or 5 hours, I gain more insight than on myself than I have in my entire life. So why wouldn't I want that benefit? I don't care that I don't see Jesus or I don't have a great long conversation with my dead grandmother or or whatever else.
Yeah.
I care that I see myself for the first time and I can love myself with all the good and the bad and my whole entire history and realize that these were things that just happened and don't necessarily, and this is who my true self is inside me. And so that so I agree. Yeah. So if you haven't done psychedelics, if you haven't eaten broccoli, you can't know the true insights you get from it or how great it tastes until you do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Aliana covers this nicely. She says, when I first met my husband, I was still an atheist. I asked, what if psychedelics were purely chemical? He said this to me as a response. Either everything in life is meaningful or nothing is, but we don't get to pick and choose. And it's true. Why would a child's birth be more meaningful than a leaf falling from a tree? The beholder gets to choose the meaning of it, right? Like, in life, you don't get to choose what happens to you, but you and you alone get to choose the meaning of that event. And there can clearly be a leaf falling from a tree, could be a sign that allows you to go on a hunt or ask someone to marry you or name a child. There's so much meaning that can go there. And I think it comes back to the individual. And I would add too to the idea that taking a psychedelic, or even if it's a chemical reaction in your brain, the fact that that chemical allowed you to learn more about yourself in a few hours than in a lifetime, why does it matter what's happening in your brain? Why does it matter if it's that?
Yeah. And, and if that neuroplasticity, if that chemical connects you to a new part of an old part of your brain that's new to you now, isn't that fantastic? I mean, who cares what the process is that gets you there, but that you have that new learning about yourself.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the outcome I want. Yeah.
You know, one of the most biggest revelations that I have found for me is that under psychedelics, I got to see myself the way others see me. And like that was so profound to me because I got to be on some levels, it was like, wow, this person really loves me. You know, I cannot, oh my God, wow, I should try to love them more. I should do this. And then other times I'm like, oh, I don't think that person thinks a whole lot about me. You know? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I never thought about it like that. But just the fact, like, what a gift it is to be able to see yourself the way others see you, or what a gift it is to get to see yourself or learn more about yourself. Like, you know, these sorts of realizations or revelations that happen to you are profound because they can have life-changing ramifications. And again, like, why it doesn't matter. The clinical trials are irrelevant in so many ways. It doesn't matter which receptors triggered for what thing and if you have the trip or not. Like that to me on some level is the most ridiculous, stupidest, dumbest waste of time anybody can do. It works. What, like, are you trying to find out if it works for 0.007% of the nation? Hey, congratulations. I guess we need that, but
well,
it
and
works.
that's the ridiculous part, George.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, you look at and the Prozac and that original round of antidepressants, the efficacy of those drugs was so minor, but you play with the statistics, and then the numbers get a little better, and then the FDA approves it. And you look back, speaking of hindsight, you look back and you say, oh man, people were paid off pretty big on that. Because then you look at psychedelics, and we have to go through every I has to be dotted, every T has to be crossed. And if it's not, go back, do another trial. Let's try it again. And then even some of the results, oh yes, oh well, only 45%, blah, blah, blah. It's working. You know, why are we focused on this? And yeah, I agree. I think for whatever reason, psychedelics are having to do the most complicated Olympic routine to get approved versus the other ones that just walked into the facility and were given the gold medal, you know? So so I think it's a necessary evil, but I 100% agree with you that it's a folly that we're doing because we know it works. You know, everyone we talk to, if they do it the right way, and sometimes if they don't do it the right, sometimes again, I just want to stress this because the medicine's going to work on you. Even if you didn't plan for it to work on you. And so that's why it scares me when people say, you know, they go to a concert and they're going to do the psychedelics just because some heavy stuff can come out and here you are watching a concert and whoa, but the point is, they work. And if you give them the opportunity to work and you take the time, back to what we were talking about earlier, to examine it and what we call integrate it, then you'll find out some things about yourself that you will never in a million other ways have a chance to find out about yourself, and to live this authentic self life is, I don't know how to describe it. You just feel lighter. There's more joy. It's not a perfect life. We're not talking a perfect life. We're just talking about a life where you can just take off all those masks, take off all those shells, whatever you want to call it, and just say, here I am, naked and proud, and love me or don't. You know, I don't need it. Not everyone needs to love me. You know, it's true. You know, we're focused on this comparison syndrome and this feeling of we all have to get along and we all have to be loved, and you know, some of our authentic selves are a little wacky, a little weird, and only certain people are going to love us. Thank God, George, you're one that loves me.
It's so true.
Yeah,
it's very true. Yeah, it's here's another one that says if every young man in 1968 had a psychedelic experience, good luck fielding a force in Vietnam. They
Yep.
had to put, they went to a voluntary force after that, right? It was conscription,
Yeah.
and now it's voluntary. And they say sometimes out of great tragedy comes great realization. And I think that the reason they had so much pushback afterwards is because they forced people to go, and they realize that can't happen again because no one will go.
Yeah. Yeah. I have veterans tell me that now, that after they've had the psychedelic healing, that they say the same thing. He said, if every world leader had a psychedelic experience, there'd be no wars, because
Yeah.
no one would want, and certainly, or if the world had it, no one would have the want to fight, and again, yeah, who wants to kill your brother or sister? We don't. We just want to live our lives. So yeah, that's my one little fear about now. Although I think we're far enough into the Renaissance now that I think the governments couldn't pull back to do the same thing again. Although we still haven't rescheduled, so it hasn't officially happened. But I think there's enough in Congress and at the state level that they're realizing that we can't go back to the 70s again. We have to move forward. So I think it still will happen.
Yeah, I think that there is a sort of control. There's a recognition that the genie doesn't go back in the bottle.
Yep.
But there's this idea that they can control the genie. And that's why, in my opinion, you're going to see anybody that tries to start a for-profit psychedelic company is probably going to fail, because the powers that be want it to have. The only way to have a successful model is to have a way to centralize it. And that's why they're constantly looking for, hey, how do we get this thing without the psychedelic part?
Right.
Hey, how do we rejigger this molecule so we can patent it? Because it's very hard to monetize mushrooms. It's very hard to monetize these things that are out there, right? So with monetization comes centralization, supply chains, industry, treatment. And that's what one half of this group is desperately trying to do. They're like, how do we make this thing fit in this model?
Yeah.
But you can't use a cookie cutter to mold steel. Like, it doesn't work. You can't use a cookie cutter for a phone case because it doesn't fit in there.
Yeah.
And so people are desperately trying to jam it into this cookie cutter model, but it's not going to work. And in some ways it saddens me to see people that have gone out of their way to raise money to start this for-profit business because they want to help people, and to see them fail. But that seems to be the MO. Like, I just don't see how you monetize it. And in some ways it makes me sad, but in other ways it kind of makes me see what the reality is. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to the language, or back to new models. I think what they're doing is that, well, the pharmaceutical model works. Let's just use that. We'll create we'll create a synthesized version of psilocybin, and you'll have to go to your doctor, get it prescribed, and follow that because that model worked. The Mercks and all the other pharmaceutical companies are making billions and billions of profits. So that model works, and the FDA likes it, the CDC likes it. So I see them following that, which is why I love the decrim model. I back to what we were saying before, I walk a line because I don't want people necessarily to have that first psychedelic experience by themselves, especially if they don't do the research. But I think, as you said, after they've learned it, done it maybe at a retreat, and know the process and know the medicine, that they should have the full right to be able to do that at their home in a safe location without having to go to their doctor and getting a non-natural version of that medicine, which some say probably works the same as the natural, and we could debate that too. But then, they're developing this LSD bromo, which is LSD without the psychedelic effect. And so, but that fits the medical model because the non-psychedelic, the LSD bromo, still has the brain chemistry aspects that they can prove, but it has none of the psychedelic experience. So, but to me, the psychedelic experience is the part that allows that introspection.
Yeah.
I don't think it works with the bromo because that's just impacting your brain, but not shutting down the default mode network so that it quiets your brain so you can have these other hallucinogenic experiences. But I fear, again, I laud that what MAPS is doing because
Yeah.
it's the avenue they have to do.
Yeah.
But that cannot be the only avenue for psychedelics because that again falls into a paternal model where I have to get approval
Right.
unless I go out into my cow pasture over here and start harvesting my own. And so I agree. I think we have to figure out what works. Yeah, I certainly don't want either a Merck or a Philip Morris to now be running my mushroom supply or my LSD supply. I just mainly because I just don't trust them. When
Yeah.
you put profits above everything else, and to me, psychedelics is the opposite of that. Because when you heal, you want to give back, and it's not that you don't want to make money, but you don't need to run over 10,000 people to make your money. You can make your money in a way where you're helping people.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in Denver they just changed the law so that you have to have a license now. It used to be that you could be a practitioner without a license. I think that's what it was. I don't know exactly. Know anything about that?
I don't. I know Oregon's a stricter in that sense, and I know there's
Mm,
all sorts of issues with Oregon. With Colorado, I'm not as aware. Although
mm.
I've been excited to see people talking about opening an ibogaine clinic in
Yeah.
Colorado. That kind of blows my mind, but it's
Yeah.
exciting.
It is
It's
exciting.
exciting. And the other thing I love about something you mentioned earlier, George, the one thing I love about the idea of decriminalization is the problem we have with psychedelics, and actually with all these substances are illegal, is there's a black market, an underground market. So on one hand, that's good because you can get the psychedelics that way, but you can't do the research. And so there are underground centers today, and we've talked about this before, but I had a really bad experience at an underground center.
Mm.
And if it were decriminalized, the guy would have a website, there'd be
Yeah.
testimonials or not testimonials, and I could actually do the research and say, oh no, I do want to go to that retreat, or I don't want to go to that retreat center. And so that's another big benefit for me. If it gets decriminalized, then we can have all these psychedelic facilitators, all these retreat centers out in the open. I also love that idea because we can have right now, most of these nonprofits that are healing veterans are sending them down to Peru,
Mm.
Mexico. And if we decriminalize it, we can have these healing centers for veterans and first responders right here in the US. Why do they have to go fly, multiple flights to get down to Peru and then, take a bus a couple of hours to get into the jungle to find the retreat center when they can, just go to Peoria or, wherever and in the States and find that retreat center.
Yeah, it's true. And I love the direction we're going in. And I love to investigate what's going on. And I'm thankful that we're at this spot right now because I do think it's a radical shift in healing and consciousness. And I'm stoked to be alive right now. And my heart goes out to everybody that's debating, that's talking, that's working in this area. And even though we may disagree on things, I think it's all helpful to have the discussion because right when people aren't talking, then they're fighting. And it's a fun discussion, and I love to get into the nuance and dig into it, and it's a really fun time, man. Randall, we're almost coming up on 3 hours, my friend. It flies by like that. It's so much fun, and
It is, and I apologize to anyone who's still listening.
this is awesome. I think everybody
Yeah.
had an awesome time. We've gotten some great comments
Yeah,
from so
we
many
really did.
awesome
It's wonderful.
people.
Thank you, everyone who did those comments. Wonderful. I love it.
Yeah. And so before I let you go, Randall, where can people find you? What do you have coming up and what are you excited about?
Well, if you're a skeptic, please go to triumphovertraumabook.com. My email address is for that particular one is ran@triumphovertraumabook.com. Send me an email. Give me more reasons why you're a skeptic, or if it's that one example of that there's nothing else happens, tell me more about that. Find me on LinkedIn. That's where I try to do a weekly article about healing or about psychedelics. And then, soon, more about my new book. But if you go to healmewhole.com, you can get a little preview of what's to come.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, what an incredible show. What an incredible guest. What an incredible audience. Thank you so much to everybody. I hope you have a beautiful Friday. I hope you have a beautiful weekend. Check out the show notes. Check out Rand. Thank you for supporting the True Life podcast. We love you guys. That's all we got for today. Aloha.
Aloha.